board will now come to order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus, Alderwoman Flowers, Alderman Bosley, Alderman Moore, Alderwoman Hubbard, Alderwoman Ingracia, Alderman Coulter, Alderman Conway, Alderman Ortman, Alderman Vollmer, Alderman Villa, Alderman Arnowitz, Alderwoman Murphy, Alderwoman Howard, Alderwoman Green, Alderwoman Behringer, Alderman Rhodey, Alderman Kennedy, Alderwoman Davis, Alderwoman Spencer, Alderman French, Alderman Boyd, Alderman Vaccaro, Alderman Ogilvie, Alderman Cone, Alderman Williamson, Alderman Carter, Alderwoman Cruson, President Reed,
Here.
Alderwoman Tyus, Alderman Bosley, Alderwoman Hubbard, Alderwoman Ingracia, Alderman Coulter, Alderman Conway, Alderman Arnowitz, Alderman Rhodey, Alderman Kennedy, Alderwoman Davis, Alderman Boyd, Alderman Vaccaro, Alderman Cone, Alderman Williamson, 18 present.
Quorum being present, we will be led today in prayer by Reverend Lamar Booker from St. Paul AME Church.
President Reed and members of the St. Louis Alderman Board of Aldermen, before I pray, will you pause now to ask God's blessings upon the family of Ivy Pinkston, the Deputy Controller for 26 years, who's made her transition. Will you pause and remember the children, young people, our sons and daughters who are away at college. And what happened yesterday in Oregon was a tragedy. Let's pray for those families who lost their children's lives yesterday. And Michael, the prophet, declared, he has showed thee what is plain and how to live, what to do, what God is looking for in men and women. It's quite simple. Replies Michael, do what is fair and just to your neighbor. Be compassionate and loyal in love. And don't take yourself too seriously. But by all means, take God seriously. Almighty God, you have given us this good land for our heritage. We humbly ask you that we may always prove ourselves a people mindful of your favor and glad to do your will. Bless St. Louis, Missouri. Bless the honorable endeavors that comes out of this room. May it be sound and pure in its manner. Bless these children, for I believe the children are our future. Help us to teach them well and allow us to see them as they lead the way. Save us from violence, discord, and confusion, from pride and arrogance, and from every evil deed. Help us to defend our liberties. Those who are disabled, may their cause be heard. Fashion us into a united people. Bring us into unity. Endow the spirit of wisdom to those in this room, the president, the aldermen who you have entrusted the authority of St. Louis government, that there may be justice and peace, and that through the obedience of the law, we all may show forth your praise among nations of the earth. And Lord, in times of prosperity, fill our hearts with thanksgiving. And in the day of trouble, do not allow our trust in you to fail. This is my prayer for my city, and this is our prayer. Amen.
That was a great prayer. It's a great way to open today's meeting. Let's give a round of applause to the New City School children who have joined us here today. They help bring us into session today, and I really appreciate it. It's always a good day when we see you all down here and get an opportunity to talk to them and show them a little bit about what we're doing here. And I'm always surprised at how much they know. So the teachers, that shows you the teachers are doing a great job. Let's give them a round of applause, the teachers and administrators. With that, we'll take up our courtesy resolution calendar. I move for adoption of our courtesy resolution calendar and obtain a second on that motion. Seconded by the Alderman from the 18th. Alderman from the 4th, would you like to approach the dais?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We have an honorarium to present to a young lady who I am very proud of, and you all should be proud of once you hear her story. She has accomplished a lot in a short period of time, and this is an example of our future. The resolution, please. The clerk told me to talk. She said I do that real well, but I'm going to read this. Thank you, Donna. Whereas Olivia is a Girl Scout senior in Troop 4990 and a sophomore at Mary Institute and Country Day School, MICDS, and whereas Olivia outlined her plans to make a positive impact on the organization. Her goal is to first focus on older Girl Scouts and address issues like retention, time management, establishing healthy relationships. She would like to also inspire younger girls to continue participating in the Girl Scout camps and activities so that they can earn badges, awards, and assist the community events. Whereas she is proud to have earned her Girl Scout Silver Award in 2013, and she completed her second term as Girls Congress Secretary-elect. Girl Congress is an opportunity for experienced Girl Scouts to enhance the Girl Scouting experience for all girls. And whereas Olivia has participated in several programs throughout the Girl Scouts, she also attended Project Anti-Violence Education, PAVE Camp, April Showers, and the Girls with Power Series. And whereas after she graduates from high school, she would like to attend Vanderbilt University and major in biomedical engineering with a set of goals to either develop prosthetic limbs or conduct stem cell research. Now therefore be it resolved by the Board of Aldermen of the City of St. Louis that we pause in our deliberations to recognize Olivia Martin, and we further direct the clerk of this board to spread a copy of this resolution across the minutes of these proceedings and to prepare a commemorative copy to the end that it may be presented to our honoree at the time and place deemed appropriate by the sponsor, Honorable Samuel Moore. Let's give a round of applause. I also want to say that Olivia is a niece of the now Lieutenant Colonel Ronnie Robinson. This is all family. And my wife is up here. This is her cousin. My wife, Linda Moore. If you don't know my wife, you know who collects all the trouble after you guys get beat on. Come forward, wife. I want y'all to see my boss. Olivia, when I began to notice the accomplishments of Olivia, she received the National Society of Black Engineers Academic Commitment and Excellence Award. And there were a lot of young people there, and I was so inspired. I'm always inspired by Olivia, but she has accomplished a lot. Now, we have a long way to go today, but here are 3 pages of her accomplishments that I won't read to you right now because y'all know how I am when I get to talking. Thank you, Dion. But Olivia, I'd like for you to come up and have words and introduce your mother and your grandmother. Come, Olivia. And this is your pawpaw, too.
All right. Hi, I'm Olivia Martin. Like you said, I'm a senior at MICDS. My mom is Kendra Neely Martin. My dad's Thomas Martin. And my grandma Ernestine Neely. I've been working all of high school to work with the Girl Scouts to enhance and increase the number of high school Girl Scouts because I'm the only one in my high school, and I think Girl Scouts teaches invaluable skills that I wouldn't have the opportunity to learn other places, and I think my friends should have the same opportunities as I do to learn things and be prepared for college and the next step. So all of my efforts in high school have really been to increase the opportunities that my friends are able to receive that I have. Yeah. Oh, and everyone I have on the stage. So I have my Aunt Felicia. And then I have family on this side. I can't see. I have Linda Tater here. And then I have Nicole Alawale. Then Lanier. Patton. My godmother. Okay. Sorry. Peggy Smith. And then Mason.
Everybody.
I'm sorry, I couldn't see everyone. Yes, and that's everyone introduced? Yes.
Wait. Stay for the photo op. Please stay for the photo op on this side. We're going to step on the steps. Olivia, hold your document. Louis, would you explain to them what this document is?
So, Olivia, I tell you, as a father of 4, I look at your parents and your grandmother and all the good, strong people you have behind you, and I know how proud they are of you today and your accomplishments thus far. And I want to just, at the request of the Alderman from the 4th Ward, explain to you what this resolution is. This resolution is the highest honor the Board of Aldermen has to give to any organization or individual. And what it does, it cements in time some of your many contributions up until this moment. So 100, 200 years from now, when you go back and research the permanent records of the City of St. Louis, they will find your name amongst those records, Olivia Martin. and be able to read about your accomplishments at such a young age. We expect great things out of you. You've already done great things, and I'm honored to share this dais with you today. And congratulations, and keep on doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
Alderman Moore wanted me to remind everybody she's also the license collector's family. It's been moved and seconded that we adopt our courtesy resolution calendar. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. With that, we return to our regular order of business. Let's give New City Schools one more round of applause as they have a great day, guys. Have a great day. Introduction of honored guests. Any introduction of honored guests? Alderman from the 9th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the board, I'd like to have for my honored guests again, Lynn and Nick Bouchang.
Welcome. Alderman from the 15th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I'd like to have as my special guest today Amy Weimeyer, the CEO of Paraquad, 15th Ward resident and CTI member Teresa Jordan, Charlene Day, Craig Mershon, Paige Crayas, Monica Williams, Steve Folish, all from CTI, Michael Anderson, who is at Paraquad, and Chris Worth at CTI and Paraquad, and Sharon Smith, who is at CTI.
Okay. Alderman from 13th.
Yes, President, members of the board, I'd like to have my honored guests this morning, Jeff Hans and Todd Haight from Carpenter's District Council.
Alderman from the 2nd.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I'd like to have as my honored guest Maxine Robinson from Worth Industries, David Orr from Worth Industries, and Felicia, who is a shop worker.
Welcome. Welcome. Alderman from the 14th.
Good morning, Mr. President. I'd like to have for my honored guest today Gary Otten from the Painters District Council number 2 and Anthony Lancia from AGC.
Alderman from the 28th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I'd like to have as my special guest this morning Tim O'Connell from Bryan Cave. Thank you.
Alderman from 26th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I'd like to have the former Comptroller Vervis Jones as my special guest and resident of the 26th Ward. Thank you.
Alderman from the 11th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning. Mr. President, to my right is my nephew Matt Vella, who is the former alderman from the 11th Ward for 14 years and is down here this morning accompanying the kids with from Alderwoman Crusen's New City School.
Oh, welcome. Nice seeing you, Matt. Any further introductions? Alderman from the 18th.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the board, I'd like to introduce Mr. John Watson, the chairman of the Academy Sherman Park Neighborhood Association. To my right.
Welcome, John. Any further introductions? Alderman from the 10th, would like to wrap us up. Alderman from the 4th. Go ahead.
I have a lot of special guests, especially my wife today and my family, Mavis Thompson, and also Mr. Percy Green. Thank you.
All right. Alderman from the 10th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. As we're gathered here on October 2nd, which is in 1890, my favorite comedian Groucho Marx was born. In 1950, on this day, Charlie Brown appeared for the first time. In 1968, during a World Series game on October 2nd, it'll be November 2nd this year, 1 month later. That's how times have changed. Bob Gibson struck out 17 people. But most importantly, today is National Custodial Workers Day. So as you're walking the halls today through the City Hall, please walk up to your favorite janitor and give them a hug. It's National Custodial Workers Day. Let's thank them for all the hard work they do.
Alderman from the 18th, you recognize on the approval of the minutes.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the board, I move for approval of the minutes of the September 18th meeting.
Moved by the Alderman from the 18th, seconded by the Alderman from the 26th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Report of city officials.
Report of city officials can be found in sections A, B, and C of the agenda and have been placed in all aldermen's mailboxes. I have from His Honor the Mayor the following correspondence. Dear members of the board, I have the pleasure to submit the following individuals for appointment to the 14th and Market Community Improvement District. The reappointment of Christopher McKee, who resides in Frontenac. The reappointment of David Meyer, who resides in Ladue. The appointment of Paul McKee, Jr., who resides in St. Louis County. The appointment of Chris Zimmerman, who resides in the 28th Ward. The appointment of Phil Siddle, who resides in Clayton. On behalf of the 14th and Market Community Improvement District, I respectfully request your approval of these appointments. Sincerely, Francis G. Slay, Mayor, City of St. Louis.
Alderman from the 7th, you recognize on the mayor's appointment to the 14th and Market Community Improvement District.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I move to approve the mayor's appointments to the 14th and Market.
Moved by the Alderman from the 7th, seconded by the Alderman from the 9th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
That's the extent of report of city officials.
We will dispense with line items 7 and 8. Would anyone like to take any bills off of any of our informal calendars? Would anyone like to take any bills off of any of our informal calendars? We've dispensed with line items 9 through 10. And first reading of board bills.
Board Bill 180, sponsored by Alderman Coulter, an ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 2268 South Jefferson and containing a severability clause. Board Bill 181, sponsored by Alderman Coulter, an ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 2242 Shenandoah and containing a severability clause. Board Bill 182, sponsored by Alderman Rhodey, an ordinance recommended by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment authorizing the city to issue its taxable industrial development revenue bonds, Series 2015, in a principal amount not to exceed $3 million for the purpose of providing funds to pay the cost of acquiring certain equipment for an industrial development project. Board Bill 183, sponsored by Alderman Coulter and Alderwoman Hubbard, an ordinance recommended by the Planning Commission approving the renaming of the entire length of the existing public street from North 3rd Street to Lumiere Place Boulevard, extending between O'Fallon Street on the north to Washington Avenue on the south. Board Bill 184, sponsored by Alderwoman Davis, an ordinance authorizing and directing the Street Commission to take all necessary actions to honorarily designate the 900 block of Garrison Avenue at Bell as Reverend Frederick Lemons Sr. Boulevard. Board Bill 185, sponsored by Alderwoman Davis, an ordinance authorizing and directing the Street Commissioner to take all necessary actions to honorarily designate the 1300 block of North Garrison Avenue at Sheridan Avenue as Miss Tilley's Corner. Board Bill 186, sponsored by Alderman Carter, an ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 5626 West Florissant and containing a severability clause. Board Bill 187, sponsored by Alderman Conway, an ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 4020 Russell and containing a severability clause. Board Bill 188, sponsored by Alderwoman Murphy, an ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 4309 Gertrude and containing a severability clause. Board Bill 189, sponsored by Alderman Villa, an ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 6329 Minnesota and containing a severability clause. That's the extent of our first reading.
Reference to committee.
To the Housing Committee, Board Bills 182 and 186. To the Neighborhood Development Committee, Board Bills 187, 188, 189, 180, and 181. To the Streets Committee, Board Bills 183, 184, and 185. That's the extent of reference to committee.
Second reading.
The following board bill was reported out of the Ways and Means Committee, Board Bill 177, sponsored by Alderwoman Davis, an ordinance authorizing and directing the mayor and the comptroller to execute upon receipt of and in consideration the sum of $900 of other good and valuable consideration, a quitclaim deed to the Electricians Building Company, certain city-owned property located in City Block 981, which property is known by 2732 Dr. Martin Luther King Drive. Board Bill 160, sponsored by Alderman Rhodey, an ordinance renewing the determination that there continues in the city certain city blighted blighted area, a tract of land and for multiple properties described as follows, beginning at a point which is in this intersection of center line of Laclede and the eastern right-of-way of Vanderventer, along the eastern right-of-way to Vanderventer to I-64 and US 40, and from 40 to the center line of Vanderventer and the right-of-way from Clayton to South Newstead to Duncan, and to the 4100 block of Lindell, and to the eastern right-of-way of Newstead to Forest Park, and to the center line of Sarah and Forest Park to the center line of Laclede and its intersection with the eastern right-of-way of Vanderventer. The following board bills were reported out of the Parks Committee. Board Bill 115, Committee Substitute, sponsored by President Reed, Alderwoman Ingracia, Alderwoman Green and Spencer and Murphy, Alderman Coder, Alderman Carter, and Alderman Ogilvy, an ordinance pertaining to the 12th and Park, Booter, Cherokee, Gamble, Marquette, Tandy, and Wold Recreation Centers, providing that revenues derived from sources at the 12th and Park, Booter, Cherokee, Gamble, Marquette, Tandy, and Wold Recreation Centers shall be held in a special fund as created by this ordinance for each center to allow for the collection of private donations for the purpose of making capital improvements to these 7 neighborhood recreation centers. Board Bill 176, sponsored by Alderwoman Cruzen and Alderman Coulter, an ordinance authorizing the Board of Public Service to execute a construction oversight, museum development, and operating agreement with the Missouri Historical Society, authorizing BPS to execute such agreement, and containing a savings clause, a severability clause, and an emergency clause. That's the extent of our second reading.
Dispense with line item 14, perfection consent.
Board Bill 130, sponsored by Alderwoman Green, and ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 3865 Humphrey, and containing a severability clause. Board Bill 131, sponsored by Alderman Ogilvy, and ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 5803 through 37 Dale, and containing a severability clause. Board Bill 132, sponsored by Alderman Vollmer, and ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 5213 through 5215 Bischoff, and containing a severability clause. Board Bill 133, sponsored by Alderman Kennedy, and ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 930 through 936 North Kings Highway, containing a severability clause. Board Bill 143, sponsored by Alderman Moore, and ordinance approving a redevelopment plan for the Greaterville scattered sites. Board Bill 144, sponsored by Alderman Ortman, and ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 2119 Arsenal, and containing a severability clause. Board Bill 145, sponsored by Alderman Ortman, and ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 2213 Arsenal, and containing a severability clause. Board Bill 146, sponsored by Alderman Conway, and ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 3448 Crittenden, containing a severability clause. Board Bill 147, sponsored by Alderman Conway, and ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 3859 Flora Place, and containing a severability clause. Board Bill 148, sponsored by Alderman Conway, and ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 5347 through 5349 Wilson, and containing a severability clause. Board Bill 149, sponsored by Alderman Conway, and ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 4028 Botanical, and containing a severability clause. Board Bill 150, sponsored by Alderman Conway, and ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 3940 Shaw, containing a severability clause. Board Bill 151, sponsored by Alderwoman Ingracia and Alderman Coulter, and ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for Tower Grove East Park scattered sites, containing a severability clause. Board Bill 152, sponsored by Alderman Arnowitz, and ordinance approving a blighting study and ordinance approving a redevelopment plan for 4092 Roberts. Board Bill 154, sponsored by Alderman Rhodey, and ordinance approving a redevelopment plan for 5215 Manchester. Board Bill 155, sponsored by Alderwoman Green, and ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 3661 Hartford, and containing a severability clause. Board Bill 156, sponsored by Alderwoman Green, and ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 3662 Humphrey, and containing a severability clause. Board Bill 157, sponsored by Alderwoman Green, and ordinance approving a redevelopment plan for 4168 Juniata. Board Bill 158, sponsored by Alderman Ogilvy, and ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 1509 Fairmont, and containing a severability clause, Board Bill 159, sponsored by Alderman Coulter, an ordinance approving a redevelopment plan for 700 through 02 Allen. Board Bill 161, sponsored by Alderman Williamson, an ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 5510 through 26 Pershing, and containing a severability clause. Board Bill 174, sponsored by Alderwoman Cruzen, an ordinance recommended and approved by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, authorizing and directing the Director of Airports and the Comptroller to enter into and execute the Lambert Airport Lease Agreement AL 208 between the City and the State by the Office of Administration, Division of Facilities Management, Design and Construction, containing a severability and an emergency clause. Board Bill 175, sponsored by Alderwoman Cruzen, and ordinance recommended and approved by the Airport Commission, the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, authorizing and directing the Director of Airports and the Comptroller to enter into and execute the Lambert Airport Display Advertising Concession Agreement, AL 023, between the City and Clear Channel Outdoor Incorporated, doing business as Clear Channel Airports, containing a severability and an emergency clause. Board Bill 128, sponsored by Alderwoman Davis, and ordinance approving a redevelopment plan for 1701 Locust Street. Board Bill 129, sponsored by Alderman Coulter, and ordinance approving a redevelopment plan for 405 Washington Avenue. Board Bill 142, sponsored by Alderman Ortman, and ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 3201 through 3207 Cherokee, and containing a severability clause. Board Bill 153, sponsored by Alderman Ortman, and ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 2201 Cherokee, and containing a severability clause. Board Bill 162, sponsored by Alderwoman Hubbard, and ordinance approving a redevelopment plan for 1601 through 1723 Delmar. Board Bill 172, sponsored by Alderman Rhodey, and ordinance authorizing the execution of amendment to the redevelopment agreement by and between the City and TriStar Imports, containing a severability clause. That's the extent of perfection consent.
Alderman from the 18th, you recognize on the motion for the perfection consent calendar.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the board, I move for adoption of the perfection consent calendar.
Moved by the Alderman from the 18th, seconded by the Alderman from the 9th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Board bills for perfection.
Board Bill 173, sponsored by Alderman Ogilvy, Alderwoman Flowers, and Alderman Ortman, an ordinance pertaining to the regulation of minimum wage, amending Ordinance 70078 pertaining to Section 1, definitions, containing a severability clause and an emergency clause.
Alderman from 24th, you recognize on the perfection of Board Bill number 173.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move we perfect Board Bill 173.
Been moved by the Alderman from the 24th, seconded by the Alderman from the 9th. Alderman, please proceed.
Certainly. I think many people in the room know the history of this, but we'll just do a brief recap. There are 4 sheltered workshops in the city of St. Louis that provide services and employment to individuals who have developmental disabilities. And federal law and state law dealing with the minimum wage has a section that deals with sheltered workshops that permits and authorizes them to pay something called a commensurate wage, which is based on the area prevailing wage for an activity. And that wage varies for each individual who's employed. When Board Bill 83 was introduced early in the summer, the original bill had identical language to our state minimum wage law, which protects sheltered workshops and makes sure they can continue to operate and provide the services they have been providing. Late in the game, when we came back for a special meeting, that exemption, or that language, was removed. So, as it stands today, the city's municipal minimum wage law would apply to sheltered workshops. That is a critical issue for the roughly 375 individuals who are employed by sheltered workshops, because when the $8.25 an hour minimum wage kicks in on October 15th, we're going to almost immediately see all the four sheltered workshops in the city have a problem continuing to provide the services they provide. So effectively what we're going to be doing is we could have a situation where very soon we have 375 people who today have jobs and who may not have jobs in the coming months. And that is I believe this very strongly. That was not the intent of passing a minimum wage law for the city. The intent was to help people, and if we don't change the bill, we're going to be hurting people rather than helping people. It was frustrating to see that language change, I think, in the floor substitute, because the sheltered workshops themselves, their employees, the families of their employees, did not have a chance to weigh in and describe exactly how that would impact the organizations and, more importantly, the lives and the families of the people who work at sheltered workshops. They didn't have a chance to tell that story. I'm glad that we did have a chance to discuss that in committee, and I think overwhelmingly the message from the families of employees of sheltered workshops has been, this is a program that is good for us, that works for our families, that is a critical, essential part of our lives, and there is no reason to eliminate sheltered workshops, especially in this reckless manner that Board Bill 83 did it, with no alternative. It is not responsible to proceed in this way. So passing this bill, Board Bill 173, fixes that problem. And over and over again, I have found that on this issue, the people closest to the issue are better able to explain and talk about this than I am. And I've tried to read letters from families to really communicate how important this is. And I want to go to one letter and one quote from the committee hearing. So this is a letter from DD Resources. I'm going to read the whole letter because I think this letter sums up in its entirety what this issue is about. It's one page, so just bear with me. Dear Honorable Alderpersons, the purpose of this letter is to provide some background information that relates to Board Bill 173. The St. Louis Office for Developmental Disability Resources is a publicly funded agency that distributes funds to service providers for community-based services to persons who have a developmental disability and desire to remain in their homes and community. One of our core values is to ensure that individuals have the opportunity to choose the services and providers that will meet their specific needs. Sheltered workshops are part of the overall employment spectrum for individuals with developmental disabilities. For some, it is a stepping stone to competitive employment. For others, it is truly the best employment option that will accommodate their individual needs and to allow for self-determination. If this bill is not passed, and she's referring to the bill we're talking about, Board Bill 173, if this bill is not passed, this employment option could be eliminated in the city of St. Louis, leaving Medicaid waiver-funded day programs being homebound, volunteering, or competitive employment as the remaining choices, with the former three offering no pay. Individuals with developmental disabilities who are competitively employed often have to limit their work hours so as not to interfere with state and federal benefits. Sheltered workshops continue to be, I think this sentence is important, sheltered workshops continue to be a vital provider of employment services to our community, serving nearly 400 persons with developmental disabilities and their families. The services provided by the sheltered workshops are in compliance with DD Resources' mission to ensure individuals who have developmental disabilities in the city of St. Louis have quality services, choices, and full inclusion. Respectfully, Michelle Darden, Executive Director of DD Resources. I'll read the quote off my phone. This is a quote that is from the committee hearing on this subject. This is Antonia Banks. These sheltered workshops mean so much to many people with disabilities and their families who sometimes can't make it in the mainstream workplace, Banks said. His job was part of John Paul's health and wellness. John Paul has been a gift to us from God, and industrial aid has been a gift to John Paul from God. So that's a message directly from a mother of an employee of a sheltered workshop. And I hope that makes the issue as clear as it can be for us that we should pass Board Bill 173. We should make sure sheltered workshops can continue to operate because they're providing vital services to our residents. And the floor substitute of Board Bill 83 missed the mark because it created a scenario locally where we passed a law that is hurting people, not helping people. And as the Hippocratic Oath goes, do no harm. That ought to be our mission. So we can solve the problem here today. Let's pass Board Bill 173. It's really, I think, the best thing for all the families involved. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 6th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I would like to introduce Board Bill 173 floor substitute, a copy of which should be on everyone's desks at this point.
It's not on my desk.
Does everyone have a copy of the floor substitute for Board Bill number 173? Yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. The first thing I wanted to point out to everyone.
You want to make a motion to introduce the floor substitute?
Oh, I thought I did.
It wasn't on his desk. So
I'd like to make a motion to introduce 173 floor substitute.
Been moved by the Alderman from the 6th. Entertain second on that motion. Seconded by the Alderwoman from the 15th. Alderwoman from the 6th, you want to discuss?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. The first thing I wanted to note is just on page 1, line 15, there's a clerical error. On October 15th, it should read 2015 and not 2016.
Okay.
And then I wanted to discuss, I do believe that the Alderman from the 24th made a lot of valid points. I do believe, however, that we are at a pivotal moment in this country's history, and even more powerfully right here in the city of St. Louis with respect to the disability rights movement. I think now is the time to acknowledge that decades-old policies that are in place are just not what the line of thinking is any longer. Sub-minimum wage is not in line with national disability policy today, starting with the 1999 Supreme Court's Olmstead decision, moving towards the 2014 Federal Investment and Opportunity Act is significantly limiting placements where people can earn less than minimum wage. In fact, Vermont, Oregon, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Maine, and Virginia have all been reworking their systems to allow people to either work outside of sheltered workshops or to make the minimum wage. I believe at this time in St. Louis City, we should phase in a more strict minimum wage for sheltered workshops, beginning with $4.50 an hour, which is half of our minimum wage on January 2016, and taking 7 years to implement to the full wage, which is more time than any state or anywhere else in the country has done so far. And that we work together to make sure that we can either have sheltered workshops reconvene themselves as social service agencies, where we can look at whether or not some people who have more debilitating disabilities to be able to perform the work they are currently performing, but not necessarily as paid employment. I think that the argument with respect to the disability benefits that people receive is a little bit misguided. There are a number of things in place in the state that will allow for people to transition very easily and still go back to that system if need be. And finally, I would just like to say that we're pioneers here in St. Louis City. Max Starkloff with Paraquad was able to really help disabled people here with pioneering independent living. And I think now, moving into the 21st century and allowing a class of people to no longer be discriminated against with respect to earning a living, I hope you join me today in making a statement that we will no longer tolerate this. It isn't lawful for classes of individuals, and it reinforces a life of poverty for people.
Alderman from the 11th.
Mr. President, to inquire the Alderwoman from the 6th, please.
Alderwoman from the 6th, will you yield for questioning to the Alderman from the 11th? Alderman from the 11th, please proceed.
Good morning. Alderman, the floor substitute I'm looking at has the alderman from the 24th and the alderman from the 9th and the alderman from the 2nd. Is that your amendment?
It is.
And it is misnamed to confuse us?
Definitely not to confuse you. I apologize without a clerk. I did my best to make this in the correct format.
Your apology is accepted, but this is your amendment with some different people's names on it just to throw us off. And in the lack of a clerk.
I like to keep you on your toes, sir.
Yeah. Thank you. I know I'm getting up in years. Thank you, Mr. President. For clarification purposes, the amendment does, in fact, not carry the title of the person that offered the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just offer, here's a point of order. I don't understand how we can amend this bill, Board Bill 173, in this format. Every part of Board Bill 173 has been struck out in this floor substitute. So, somebody may have to go to the rules, but generally, I have yet, personally at least, in 4.5 years so far, I've yet to see a floor sub that strikes out literally every single word of the bill. And I would question if that is in compliance with our rules.
Yeah, I would say that it is, because it still is on the same subject matter. It hasn't changed the substance of it. That is still concerning the wages of the minimum wage.
So
I think Alderwoman from the first was trying to chime in on that. Alderwoman from the first, please.
You're doing a good job, Mr. President.
All right, I saw you. But go ahead, Alderwoman.
No, there were people before me. Alderwoman from the 15th, I would yield for them because I want to see what they.
Okay. Alderwoman for the 15th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to start off by reading a letter from one of my constituents. For some reason, she was looked over at the committee hearing on this and did not have an opportunity, even though her name was on the list, to have her voice heard. And I think that she's in a very important voice to be heard in this conversation because she is a person who works currently at a sheltered workshop and is advocating that people with disabilities be paid the same wage that able-bodied people are paid. So her name is Teresa Jordan. She says, "Hello, I'm Teresa Jordan. I'm not just a person with a disability, but I'm also a mother and a worker. I started working at a sheltered workshop in 1985 and was at Project Inc. for 22 years. Now I'm at Industrial Aid, where I've worked for the last 8 years. I just want people to know that I don't want to see the workshop closed. They have a great place to work, but I need to be able to make a living. The sheltered workshops and some minimum wage might be okay for some people, but for people who have kids like me and who don't have a family to support them, they need a raise. When you work in the sheltered workshop, you learn how to make your money stretch because your disability check is gone before you get it. More than half of my income goes into paying my rent so my daughter and I have a home. If we're going to pass a minimum wage, I don't understand how the shelter workshops can get out of it. We pay taxes like everybody else, and we need a raise just like everybody else. Please vote for a phase-in to the minimum wage for all workers. We have a plan, and we have the expertise, so let's make it happen." I've had an opportunity to get to know Teresa over the last couple months as this issue has come forth. And I'd like to clarify just a couple of things that I think that the floor substitute does that is important. The original bill kind of took an all-or-nothing approach to it. It made this assumption that there's no middle ground in this argument, that it's either we pay sub-minimum wage in perpetuity, or we put all these sheltered workshops out of business overnight. When in fact there is a lot of middle ground in this argument, and that middle ground is providing the ability over a 7-year period to phase up to a minimum wage. So I come from nonprofit background. Most people know that about me. I was a fundraiser for nonprofits. And oftentimes you have to change your business model when you have to deal with cuts in different types of government funding. I mean, one organization that I worked for lost 75% of its government funding over 2 years. But we didn't close our doors. We retooled. We came back. We reevaluated our business model. We went after different types of grants. We upped our fundraising. We made ourselves more efficient. And we ended up coming out as a very strong organization. But that organization was not an anomaly. I've worked with 3 different organizations where we've done that same thing, where we've been able to diversify our funding base, mostly over a 3 to 5 year period. We're giving a 7-year period right now, which is far more than any other state who has phased up has given. I also wanted to talk just a little bit about this fear of losing government benefits. The narrative that we're hearing is that we can't pay people with disabilities who are working in sheltered workshops more because they will get cut off from their benefits. Well, there's a couple of reasons that that's not true. So prior to 1980, Social Security recipients who exceeded the income gaps for a program could have been kicked off of Medicaid. But in 1980, Congress passed the Social Security Disability Amendments Act, creating a 3-year demonstration program allowing disabled workers to maintain access to Medicaid when their income rose above the level at which SSI cash payments would be cut off. This program is referred to as 1619B for the legislative section that authorized it, and it allows workers to maintain Medicaid eligibility if continued employment would be seriously inhibited if they lost eligibility for Medicaid services. That is a very important statement to have out there. In Missouri, you would have to make more than $35,611 a year in order to lose your Medicaid benefits. Even at $11 an hour, which this would get to after 7 years, we would not, that person would not be making more than $35,000 a year. The same is true with Social Security. So for every $2 increase in pay, $1 is lost in Social Security benefits. So there is still a net increase of $1 per hour for people, even when you account for the decrease in Social Security benefits when people are paid a living wage. So with that, I wanted to close with what I had to say. I just hope that Teresa's voice is taken into account in this discussion. I know that there are a lot of other people like Teresa who are working at sheltered workshops, who do live independently, who do not have mom and dad or relatives to rely on. And, as a society, we need to make a decision that, Teresa's livelihood matters just as much as anybody else's who happens to have those safety and security nets there.
Any further discussion? Alderman from first.
Mr. President, members of the board, I rise in support of the floor substitute. And first of all, I want to thank the people who have been working so hard, the Alderman from the 6th, the Alderman from the 15th, and others, the primary sponsor, Alderman Cohen from the 25th. They are showing us what leadership is about. I did take time to sit and talk to some of the people who wanted to lobby me against supporting the increase and wanted to roll back the increase we passed a few weeks ago. And so in sitting down, and I've read all the letters and I got all the information from people who sent it to me, what struck me was, and what I said to several people was that you keep sending me these emotional letters, and they're emotional, and I hear them. And I actually, when I was in high school, worked at a place called Progress School. So since I was 16 years old, I've done a lot of social service things. I worked in a group home. I was a public defender. So I believe in social justice and working towards social goals. But what I did not get, which would convince me, if you really were trying to convince me, was someone who submitted their budget to me and said, this is my budget right now. this is how we are working, and this is how much we're paying, and this is what we're doing, and giving me full transparency, and this is what would happen if what you want happens. Nobody gave me that. What I got is a lot of emotional letters about how it would affect people's lives, and that's not because they have access to these people's budgets, it's because that's what they've been told. And it's easy for people to scare people. It's gone on for years and years and years and years and years, from black people getting the right to vote to women getting the right to vote. Whenever there's been a change, people tend to not want to see it happen because they get very comfortable in how things used to be. And so I think that what you've done with this transition to take a little bit at a time and to give them the chance to adapt their funding is just genius, okay? That is that's what we call a compromise. I would like to see it go immediately to what we were going to do, but if in fact that would be too much of a hardship on the sheltered workshops, this gives you a time to say, we have to look at something else. As you said, Alderman from the 15th, we have to retool. It is not going to be that way. And it's not because anybody wants to destroy a workshop or do anything. And actually, I met with one of the people, and I gave her several suggestions as things that she agreed that they could do. You just got to change the way you do things. But to continue to pay people such a low wage is just not anything I can, with good conscience, because some things you don't know about. I really didn't think about how much people were making when I've worked at places like this, because I was just so glad to see that people could get educated and have jobs, okay? And I know a lot of families need some place for their family members to go, but I do not believe if we phase this thing in that we will put anybody out. If that is in fact true, then you should handle your business like a business, which is submit your budget and show me in writing, not with emotional letters, that this is true. Not one thing that I got was dollars and cents, okay? I got a lot of emotion. You're going to put people out. I see people come down here, but how I need to make my decision is you have to prove that to me, and you have not approved that to me, and I'm asking everybody here to rethink. If you're opposed to the minimum wage, to rethink this and look at this amendment. It's a good compromise, and I'm asking people here to support the compromise and to support the floor substitute.
All right, thank you. Alderman from 24th.
The Alderwoman from the 6th, the other question.
Alderman from 6th will yield for questions to Alderman from 24th. Alderman from 24th, please proceed.
So this is one of the shortest bills I've ever introduced. It's only one sentence, really. Any handicapped person employed in a shelter workshop certified by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. That's the gist of the bill. Do you know where I got that sentence from?
I do not.
I got that sentence from Board Bill 83, which your name was on when it was introduced. So the original Board Bill 83, which the proponent of this floor substitute, excuse me, let me back up. The proponents of removing this exemption and the alderman that made the motion for the floor substitute introduced the exact same language that is in this bill, literally letter for letter, just a few months ago. So my question, I'll ask a question. What changed since, let's say, June or July, when you were advocating that we pass Board Bill 83 with letter for letter, identical language in it as this bill? What's different now? Why were you for the language in my bill and now you are against it?
I think that's a great question, and the answer is I didn't know what I didn't know, and I've been educated, and as a matter of course at the Board of Aldermen, we do committee substitutes and amendments and floor substitutes quite a bit in order to have a conversation with the community about what's best for folks, and so that is why I changed my mind.
Will the Alderman from the 15th give the questions?
Alderman from 15th will yield for questions to the Alderman from 24th.
Sure.
Alderman from 24th, please proceed.
For an individual with a disability, what's the monthly income limit to qualify for Medicaid in Missouri?
So, hold on, I have that.
It is $1,090.
$1,090. The figure I took directly from Missouri's Medicaid website is $834, and everyone is welcome to fact check that number. It's $834. So if an individual is earning more than $834 in a month, they can lose their Medicaid insurance, which is a huge issue for this community. And the idea that we're going to disregard that when family after family tells us we'll be in terrible shape if I lose or if my family member loses their Medicaid eligibility is just reckless. This is a reckless way to proceed.
So I don't think you're taking into account SSI.
I'm sorry, did I yield the floor, Mr. President?
No, he has the floor.
So the fact is it's $834, and yes, maybe some people can bust their tails to work around that in some situations, but that's the basic limit. And, you know, I find it a little bit shocking that we're going to tell a lot of families, you're eligible for Medicaid today, but look, we're going to make it a lot harder for you to continue your Medicaid eligibility. That doesn't make any sense. That's an extremely important benefit to this community, and we happen to live in a state where Medicaid eligibility is way too low. But there's nothing I can do about that on the floor of the Board of Aldermen today. It should be higher. That limit should be higher. But today, it's not, and it may not change in the near future. So we have to be, I think, extremely cognizant of that when we talk about this. So specifically to this floor sub, the floor sub phases in this minimum wage. There's a bunch of other language about a committee or something, you know, that none of us have had the time to look at, of course. But so here's the practical impact of the floor sub. Look, I understand this sounds great. You know, we're doing something for people, raising the minimum wage. I understand that. Here's the practical impact. If we pass Board Bill 173, sheltered workshops can continue to provide services. If we don't pass it, they're going to be out of business very quickly. If we pass Board Bill 173, here's what will actually happen. We will give sheltered workshops enough time to find new facilities in St. Louis County. That's what will happen. So people who now are residents, who today have access to a sheltered workshop that they can get to that's close, will get to travel farther. Or maybe some of them will just cease operating. I mean, you know, the idea that, I think to quote the Alderman from the 15th, or maybe it was the Alderman from the 1st, I'm sorry, I don't remember, need to act more like a business, was the phrase. That's exactly what sheltered workshops do. They act like businesses. They rely heavily on business revenue in order to provide the services and employment they provide. They have to competitively bid on contracts in order to continue operating. So in these sheltered workshops, you know, MERS Goodwill is a huge organization. They do a lot of things, but the other three are relatively small organizations that have a budget that's between $1 million and $2 million. And the main expense for them is salaries and managers and people, right? And their revenue, their main income source is business revenue. If they cannot competitively bid on contracts, they could lose literally all of their business revenue in a matter of weeks or months. So if an organization is 80% reliant on their business income stream, which I believe Industrial Aid, the largest sheltered workshop, is, you could put them out of business literally in weeks or months because they may not win a single additional contract because somebody else will do it cheaper. And it may be another sheltered workshop in St. Louis County. So I think we should be very clear that phasing in a minimum wage, or tomorrow or 2 years from now or 5 years from now, will make the system not work. If somebody wants to propose a system where we subsidize the wages, the sheltered workshop pays the wage they pay, and somehow some public agency subsidizes the wages, maybe that is a solution that allows them to continue to operate. But this is just a solution to delay the floor substitute. Just be clear, this is a solution to delay putting them out of business or forcing them to move. The primary beneficiary of this floor substitute is whoever owns the buildings that the sheltered workshops lease from, because they may be able to, make a few more months of their lease payments. But the idea that this is like a compromise that solves the problem is erroneous. It's not. It's just a delay to see them move someplace else. And it troubles me that we're making this kind of policy that it has a huge impact on people's lives. If we don't pass this bill, literally there will be mothers in a matter of months who may lose their own employment because they have to take care of their child who no longer has a place to go. We are using some of the most vulnerable people in this city as a political prop, and it is unacceptable that we make policy this way. I have not met a single person who hasn't said, here, let's take a look at this, but it is just irresponsible to make this policy without, for instance, talking to the local government agency that funds sheltered workshops. I mean, maybe there is another policy route to go, but that's going to take time to sit down and get everybody on the same page and understand exactly how you proceed, because we should not be risking the livelihoods of residents of our own community to make a political point. It's just irresponsible. So I rise in a strong and resolute opposition to this floor substitute. We should pass Board Bill 173 as is, as it was introduced, as it passed through committee, and by all means, if people want to continue to take this issue up, let's everybody sit down, but let's craft a policy that is responsible, that is measured, that we know will work, that we know does not risk the livelihood of our own residents. That is the minimum. That is the minimum our residents ought to expect from us. And this floor substitute doesn't do that. So, I urge my colleagues to vote against this floor sub.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman from the 23rd.
Will the Alderwoman from the 6th yield for questions?
Alderman from the 6th will yield for questions to the
I
Alderman from the 23rd. Alderman from the 23rd, please proceed.
Obviously, I'm opposed to this, but so you would be okay if tomorrow I just go ahead and randomly put your name on any bill I sponsor?
I would not be okay with that.
You would not, but yet you were okay. Did you talk to Alderman Cohn or Alderman Flowers or Alderman Ortman about putting their name on your floor substitute?
I've already indicated that without a clerk, I did my best to draft this in the correct form.
Well, obviously, you should be reintroducing this and taking their names off and putting your name on it.
I'm happy to offer an amendment right now to remove those names and put my name on it.
Well, that's what I would suggest. No further question.
All right. Alderman from the 28th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I don't know how all of my colleagues feel about this, but personally I'm very conflicted about this bill. Someone who I respect and an organization who I respect very much, which is Colleen Starkloff at Paraquad, is opposed to Board Bill 173. The disabled community seems to be on opposite sides of this issue, and I think that makes it very difficult for us. At least I don't know all of the nuances of this as well as they do, and so I am just wondering if possibly the Alderman from the 24th would yield for a question on that.
Alderman from 24th will yield for question to the Alderman from 28th.
Yes.
Alderman from 28th, please proceed.
Thank you. I just wonder, how do you reconcile that, that Paraquad is opposed to this bill when they do speak for a lot of the disabled community? I mean, just talk to me a little bit about that.
Sure. I mean, well, I can't speak for Paraquad.
I know, but you've done a lot more research on this than I have.
And we agree that, there's nobody, I think, in the room that doesn't support the mission of Paraquad and the work they do. I will say that Paraquad is not a sheltered workshop. So Paraquad is not directly involved in this type of activity. And, their opinion is valuable, but we have organizations that directly do this work who are also service provider agencies. The sheltered workshops are not, it's a dual mission of providing services and employment to people with disabilities. So I think to summarize the argument of Paraquad, they're looking at this as an equity issue, and I think we need to be, which is fine, and I have heard sheltered workshops say, look, if it was possible to do what they are asking us to do right now, that would be fine. But I think we have to respect the expertise of these organizations who are members of our community, who every day provide services to disabled individuals, when they say, right now it's not possible to do that, and we won't be able to operate if you change the rules on us in this fashion. So I think that is the tension. It's the what sounds good and what sounds like an equity solution versus the actual practical impact on the ground that will happen very quickly. So that's why I think nobody is saying, at least I have not heard anybody say, hey, we're closing the doors, don't talk to us about this issue anymore. Everybody involved has been willing to open the doors and say, here's how we work, here's what we do, we provide these services. If there's something else, a policy that is as good or better that maintains these services that you can help us with, sure, let's talk about that.
Yep.
But this kind of on-the-fly policy making on this subject is not going to result, I think, in a good outcome.
Okay, thank you. I guess I understand that argument. It is a bit of the same argument that many types of businesses made about the minimum wage. Oh, if we increase the minimum wage, nursing homes are going to go out of business, or restaurants are going to go out of business, or all grocery stores are going to go out of business. So it's a similar argument. It's certainly different in some respects, but I think we'll just have to play that one out. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? Alderman from the 25th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise this morning with a great amount of conflict in my heart over this particular issue, and not because I don't believe that we shouldn't provide the sheltered workshops with the opportunity to survive, but I do think that with these types of discussions, people do learn and things evolve. And I think that that's really important for us to note. And, I certainly believe that, as many of my friends in the disability community, advocacy community have said, dignified work should come with dignified pay. And I really, in my heart of hearts, believe that that is true. And I really struggle with this process. I sent an email out. Actually, I stood here at this microphone probably about a month ago, committed to working towards a resolution on this very matter, and spent the 2 or 3 weeks after Board Bill 83 passed having conversations with board members of sheltered workshops, having conversations with members of the disability advocacy community, having conversations with parents and participants in sheltered workshops, and took the opportunity to tour 2 of the 4 sheltered workshop facilities that are located within the city of St. Louis. I poured a lot of time in that few weeks into trying to build my own understanding and education, even if it were a crash course, in doing so, and had asked for some time from my colleague from the 24th Ward to be able to do that, to my colleague from the 28th point, try and bridge some understanding between the advocacy groups and the sheltered workshops. And, unfortunately, this board bill was introduced prior to getting everyone around the table to have that conversation. And so once this board bill 173 was introduced, it really, that became the focus of the sheltered workshops. The sheltered workshops, really wanted to pour as much energy into supporting this legislation and to maintain the status quo. And, in my opinion, I'm not here to vilify them. I think that's completely understandable when there's change around the corner and you believe it's going to harm either your institution or the, parents and families in which you serve. I wholeheartedly can appreciate and understand that. My frustration is that, we really, should have had an opportunity to get everyone around a table to help this community, which is now divided. These are organizations that have generally stood together and worked together, because this is a community that is oftentimes denigrated to the lowest ranks, and it's really, as someone who has very good friends who are with disability and family members who, also have disabilities, it's really, really hard for me to see this divide amongst a community that really otherwise would be working together to support folks in the disability community. So, I just wanted to provide some context for the folks that are trying to make decisions on, whether or not they're going to vote for either one of these pieces of legislation. I cannot say with a fair amount of certainty what is best at this point, because we weren't able to have those conversations with everyone who are stakeholders or who I believe to be stakeholders in this conversation. So, I do believe that my colleagues from the 15th and 6th wards have made some extremely valid, points in terms of, folks participating in these programs. And also, I think it's important to realize, we're talking about families and we're talking about parents. A lot of the folks that are participating in the sheltered workshops are not teenagers. They're not in their early 20s. Many of them are 30, 40 years old. Some of them don't have parents anymore. And so they are their lifeline for support. And yes, there are programs through DDR, through the state, that provide support for them, but this is one of the pegs of the stool that they're sitting on to support themselves in their lives. And making a sub-minimum wage for them is a hardship. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or doubts about it. For those that don't have the loving and warm embrace of a parent when they come home, it is a hardship for them to get by. And so I think it really is something that is worth continuing discussion on, and I'm certainly willing and able to continue this discussion even after we either pass or do not pass these bills today. So I just wanted to, like I said, provide some context and as to where I am, and also the conversations that have taken place over the last several weeks.
All right, thank you. Alderman from the 15th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to clarify a couple of things that the alderman from the 24th said, now that I found my correct page. So he was indeed correct that $834 is the amount. But I wanted to read a couple of things that Missouri has that apply specifically to people with disabilities that allow them to keep their Medicaid. So if you receive Medicaid and decide to go to work and make more than 85% of federal poverty level, which is $834, there are several ways that you are able to work and continue to keep your Medicaid. One of them is SSI 1619B. If you currently receive supplemental security income, also known as SSI, you can keep your Mo Health Net coverage even if your income is too high to get any cash benefit under SSI. And under 1619B, you can keep your Mo Health Net aka Medicaid, while earning up to $35,601 per year. We also have something called the Ticket to Work Health Assurance Program. If you're a person with a disability who has Medicaid or Missouri Health Net, there's a program of Missouri Health Net that provides health coverage to working people with disabilities in Missouri who are not otherwise eligible for Mo Health Net. People in the Ticket to Work Health Assurance Program pay a monthly premium to get full Mo Health net coverage, and individuals can have a gross income up to 300% of the federal poverty level. All of those options allow people with disabilities to become gainfully employed and still keep much needed health coverage. The last piece is regarding Medicare recipients. So if you're a person with a disability that is qualified for Medicare and you have been receiving SSDI benefits for at least the last 2 years and you decide to go back to work, you will not automatically lose your Medicare. And that is true even if you make more money to no longer qualify for SSDI cash benefits. You still get to keep your Medicare for 8.5 years. So I think those are some important programs for us to know about because, again, this narrative that's out there that it's all or nothing, that people just get cut off, isn't true. We have a lot of safety nets for people with disabilities in Missouri at the moment. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Alderman from the 17th.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the board. I'm sitting here and it's like a state of disbelief. We have the alderman from the 25th talking about how collaborative this whole process was. We have the alderman from the 24th talking about how how this is affecting a few hundred people. And I'm sitting here scratching my head wondering, gosh, I feel like this is like surreal. I mean, this piece of legislation affects 55,000 job holders in the city of St. Louis. We had 2 committee hearings on it. It was introduced in this mad rush to get done. I show up at the first committee hearing. They scheduled the next one, and I missed it. And the next thing I know, we're like down here at the last session. They pull it out of committee. I was going to make a recommendation. They assign it to another committee. I don't get a chance to ask any questions. I wasn't at the table to discuss or have some input. My ward has, 60,000 people working in it. And I wasn't at any of those, at the table any time to discuss the underlying legislation. And then we're down here, and it's like the end of the summer, and I made the mistake of not having the foresight to know that this is going to come back before us, and I went on vacation with my family. And on Monday afternoon, I get an email saying that there's a board meeting on Tuesday to perfect the board bill that was pulled from committee that had 2 committee hearings, and that was it. And I'm 2,000 miles away with about 6 hours to figure out how to get back here, and of course I couldn't do it. So I missed out on the opportunity of asking any questions about this. I do have a whole lot of questions about the underlying bill and some questions about what we had here. I think this whole thing is a bill of unintended consequences because it was thrown together so quickly. And I'd like to kind of take a few minutes to make sure I kind of understand what some of those implications are. Now, I think the better way of doing things with the administration is actually having some quiet conversations and express ourselves politely off the floor. This legislation is, in essence, a huge impact on our economic development plans for the city. When I took over as the HUD's chairman, I quietly approached the administration and said, hey, we don't have a comprehensive economic development plan for the city. And I quietly met with their economic development staff almost on a weekly basis saying, why don't we get an economic development plan? I'll start going ahead and having hearings and talking about some of these economic issues so that we can become more familiar with it. You guys go out and hire a consultant. You bring your consultant in. We start building the plan. We have real public meetings so everybody participates in the development of that comprehensive economic development plan. And so I've been a chairman for 1.5 years, and we're kind of slowly starting that process. And then completely out of the blue, we find out perhaps the most significant piece of legislation impacting economic development gets introduced, and I didn't know anything about it, and I'm like offended. So I go ahead and I call up the head of SLDC. I go, what is going on here? Why are we doing all this? And he says, oh, the mayor never talked to him about it. You call up to the director of our budget to see what's going on up there, and the director of the budget doesn't know anything about the legislation. We start asking questions, and the mayor starts unloading on us tweets for asking questions, that we're against the poor people of the world. And I'm sitting here going, all I want to know is some answers.
Please state your point of order, Alderman.
He's discussing Board Bill 83, which is not what we are talking about today.
I think he's talking about the total process, including some of the things today that
the Alderman from the 25th talked about the process. Forgive me, Alderwoman, I didn't get a chance to go to a committee hearing, and I was 2,000 miles away. Now, I think I'm going to go ahead and tie this all together if you give me a couple more minutes. So I feel like I'm like in this surreal thing. I feel like I'm in The Wizard of Oz. I figured out who I am in The Wizard of Oz. I'm the Wicked Witch of the West. I think that's probably the Alderman from the 21st is the Wicked Witch of the West. I never really thought of myself that way, but I have very frequently thought of him that way. And now I feel like I guess if I'm not the Wicked Witch of the West, I must be one of the flying monkeys. So I'm on but I'm on the team. I'm part of the Wicked Witch's team. And then I look around, and of course the citizens of St. Louis are Dorothy, and they're wandering down the yellow brick road. And who else is on the yellow brick road? But there's a scarecrow, and he's looking for a brain, and I'm wondering sometimes if some of the sponsors of this legislation might be that. But then I think, no, those are smart people down there. They can't be that. And then I think, well, maybe they're a cowardly lion. They get all these people stirred up and all fired up about getting a raise, and I mean, it is really hard politically to say no. And then I think maybe, no, it's the Tin Man. The Tin Man has no heart. And I think about the Tin Man, and I think, well, maybe what they're doing is they're getting all these people riled up for political purposes, and then the mayor will go ahead and send his glass-jawed city councilor in, who will take a powder in court next week, and it'll be all the rope-a-dope, vote on the stadium thing all over again. So we got everybody all excited about this, and it's really not a big issue at all. And then I start thinking, well, maybe the mayor and some of the sponsors on this are like the Wizard of Oz. The great wizard, been mayor for 4 terms, recently elected to the Board of Aldermen, where you represent 0.5% of our region's population, which is less than 1% of our country's population. And with all that power, we rewrite the laws of economics, which have been known since the time of Adam Smith several hundred years ago, that when you increase the price of something, you go ahead and you reduce the demand for it. So there's where, I'm sitting here going, oh my gosh, what's going on here while I'm gone? And we go ahead in this mad rush to go ahead and play this game, and maybe it is just going to be the Tin Man, and the whole thing will go away next week. But it does raise some questions about other areas of the bill. We're talking about disabilities today, so we know disabilities, at least among some people's, no exceptions for them. Now, I read, because I wasn't down here, that the mayor was here when this bill was perfected. Now, of course, according to our rules, the mayor has a voice, which means we could have asked questions of the mayor, but the mayor wasn't here. I was thinking about sending him an email and asking him, and I thought, well, I'm already going to go ahead and be complaining about him. I don't want to be that much in his face. So I'm going to go ahead and ask the Alderman from the 25th, and I don't want to put you on the spot like this, Alderman, but if you don't mind, could you go ahead and answer a couple questions, because I'm trying to understand.
Alderman from the 25th will yield for questions to the Alderman from the 17th.
I will.
Alderman from the 17th, please proceed.
So as I understand it, this bill will say, or the intent of the amendment to the Alderman from the 24th bill is that if you have disabilities, you're not going to be exempt. If you're employing people with disabilities, you're going to have to comply. Is that correct?
So it actually adds an exemption into the bill for folks with disabilities, but it phases them into a higher wage than what they're
so
currently
at some
earning.
point, they will not, people who employ them will not be exempt. Now, if I read the bill correctly, and again, I missed the debate, and there's a lot of stuff going on in these roundtable meetings to develop consensus that I wasn't invited to, but it's my understanding from reading the board bill that employers who employ people with less than $500,000 in revenue and 15 employees, they're not going to be exempt, though. Is that, or they are exempt, so they don't have to pay the minimum wage. So if you employ disabilities and you have more than 15 people or have over 500,000, you're not going to be exempt with this amendment or floor substitute. But if you have less than $500,000 in revenue and 15 employees, you are. Is that right? So there's an exemption if you're a small.
That's actually not right anymore. And I also just have to preface this whole dialogue that as a registered member of the Friends of Dorothy, I have to take some umbrage to your Wizard of Oz references here. But I have to say that was amended actually by the alderman from the 24th. So it's no longer $500,000 in revenue and 15 employees. It's now $500,000 or 15 employees. That was an amendment that was offered on the floor by the alderman from the 24th ward.
Okay. So the idea there is that we do have exceptions in this board bill. So not everybody is going to end up getting minimum wage. Okay.
Correct.
So that's one exception.
There actually had been more exceptions that were offered in the floor sub that was offered before we broke for summer recess, and then when we came back.
I understand it. I'd like to go ahead and figure out a way to accept everybody, Alderman. I don't know if that's possible or not. But we do have one exception there. Now, ironically, and I have the distinct honor and privilege of representing not only the Paraquad, but I also have goodwill in my district. And when the original minimum wage legislation came forward, I got a call from Paraquad, and they raised both sides of the issue. They were against it because they thought that it was going to impact their ability to provide home health care for their members, but they were also opposed to excluding this. And I'm kind of out of this, and we didn't have a committee hearing to kind of get up to speed on this. I know at the first committee hearing there were a number of people that showed up that were very concerned about the viability of home health care services, because the home health care services were being reimbursed at the state level at an amount that was below what they thought they could go ahead and provide that service for. I believe you were at the hearing, and I hope you recall that conversation.
I was, and I also toured one of the larger home health care facilities, cooperative home health care that's located in the 11th ward as well, and met with their CEO.
So it's my understanding that they're involved in the lawsuit that's going to go ahead and stop this, so I guess they still feel that this is going to impinge their ability to go ahead and provide services in the city. Is that right?
I would imagine so, if they're part of the lawsuit.
So as time goes along, if this board, your original board bill goes into effect, and we get to the situation where people who are, say, needing hospice care or home health care, and we can't find companies to do that because the state doesn't reimburse them enough, will you support an amendment to exempt the home health care providers then?
So I had supported an amendment, a floor substitute that had the exemption in there, and I worked for several weeks to work with the various business owners that have businesses that basically, and I believe the exemption, if I recall correctly, was if you have 75% or more of your revenue that's derived from state reimbursement programs or the like, that you would then be not entirely exempted, but you would have a staged increase in the minimum wage as well, depending upon the industry and the reimbursement rate.
I guess what I'm trying to get at here is
people
needing hospice care.
Yes.
How many people are going to need hospice care, don't get it, before we come back down here and start thinking about how to revamp this underlying ordinance so that we can go ahead and have somebody stay with those people as they're dying. Because, I mean, I don't have a heart. It's really not something that I'm particularly cared about. But, you know, gosh, if their family starts calling me up and saying, hey, Joe, fix this, I'd like to know what the answer is.
So I don't have an answer for you, but the answer to your...
But we have a piece of legislation that was passed by this Board of Aldermen and signed by the mayor that we have a whole bunch of people think are going to shut them down and they're not going to be able to provide home health care. We're going to have people dying in the city without hospice care.
There are people dying in the city every single day from gunshot wounds and others, and we're addressing a $3 million bond issue for Square Inc. and the Cortex Center.
Alderman from the 25th.
Okay.
Alderman from
So
the
I have a couple more questions here. So let's say that I'm a professional athlete and I make $20 million a year, and I live in one of the big houses over in the 28th Ward, and I got 5 people working for me. I got a driver, I got a house cleaner, I got a butler, I got
a golf caddy,
all this stuff. Now, I'm not a business, and I'm a W-2 employee of the St. Louis Cardinals, and I know this is all about income parity. Now, if I run a bookstore that has $500,000 in revenue, and I have 15 people working for me, I'm not exempt from this, and I might be making $40,000 a year. But the baseball player, the professional athlete living on Westminster Place, has 5 people working for him over there, might have 20 people working for him. He's not a business. He would not have to pay the minimum wage, would he?
I got lost in the entire explanation there.
That's all right. I got lost in this whole process down here. So if you're a professional athlete and you have people working in your home, you're making $20 million a year.
I mean, employment situations are entirely variant. So,
I know they are, Alderman.
I can't answer those questions.
I know, but we're down here playing God. We're affecting people's lives. We're going to go ahead and have 400 people put out on the street because we're playing God as a result of unintended consequences. And I'm trying to ask you, is the professional athlete who's paying somebody working in their house subject to the minimum wage law? They're not, are they? Not my interpretation, they are.
Are they using an employment service? There's so many other variants that are part of that that I would need to know the answer to.
I think the answer is probably not. Okay. Now we go ahead and we have, do you have any grocery stores in your neighborhoods?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so let's say that we have a grocery store. We go ahead and we have a grocery store. They're operating. They've been there for years. It's a neighborhood amenity. Everybody likes them. They go in there. Mrs. Jones knows the butcher behind the counter. And she goes in there, and all of a sudden this thing passes, minimum wage goes, and we're all wrong. We guessed wrong. This thing actually has an impact. The grocery store goes out of business. Now it's vacant. All the neighbors are calling up complaining about the vacant grocery store. Right now what we do is when one piece of property goes vacant, we go ahead and we're so anxious to get somebody else new in there, we go ahead and we throw all kinds of economic incentives to do this. I'm guilty of it. Others are too. That was one of the things that I was hoping to work with the mayor so that we start getting some sort of rational process of this. Now, so all of a sudden a new grocery store comes in and he wants to go ahead and go into the grocery store. Now the existing grocer comes down to see us and says, hey, Alderman, I got this problem, new minimum wage thing, it's killing me. I'm going to go out of business. And so you say, I'm sorry, no exceptions. So we go ahead and bye-bye. A year later, the thing's vacant. Now a new grocer comes in and says, hey, I want to buy that vacant building, and I don't mind paying the minimum wage. But in order to do that, I'm going to go ahead and need a TIF, and it's going to need millions of dollars of subsidy. I guess by our current policy, that's okay. We're going to go ahead and take public subsidy to go ahead and provide that grocer an incentive. It's kind of funny. I don't want the alderwoman from the 15th to take this the wrong way and destroy my image of somebody who hates poor people. But my parents, it wasn't me, it was my parents, many, many years ago, were involved in the founding of an organization that takes care of indigent women, and they are a non-for-profit group. and their budget's about $2 million a year. They pay people comparable to roughly what is being paid on a home health care. Now they provide medical care, they go ahead, they provide housing, big, lots of things going on there. Now this is going to go ahead and impact them. It's going to probably add about $60,000 a year to that non-for-profit organization that is providing housing for indigent people. Now I'm still a little bit involved in the charity. My parents set it up, so I don't want you to start thinking that I'm a nice guy or anything. But I am a flying monkey, and I take pride in being a flying monkey. Now, my parents set it up. I'm a little involved with the organization. My sister is, my cousins. We're all still a little bit, trying to go ahead. So I'm talking to the executive director, and he tells me that this thing is going to add about $60,000 to their bill. This is actually located in the 18th Ward. So if they have a problem, they're a non-for-profit, they're providing housing for indigent people, are we going to create an exception for them?
Alderman, my intent with Board Bill 83, which is what we're discussing right now instead of Board Bill 173, which is before us, is not to whittle down the benefits that are provided to folks who are earning a wage in the city. The intent is to support, economic development and to support growth and to address health disparities and other disparities in our community as a result of wage stagnation.
Okay.
So, that was the intent of this. It's not to come back every single time. There's a specific situation that we have absolutely no control over. I can talk about the unintended consequences of Board Bill 182, a $3 million bond issue that's being given to a private organization that's got a valuation of $6 billion, but I'm not going to. I can certainly have a long discussion about the unintended consequences of this city spending millions of dollars on billion-dollar organizations when we should be investing in people. I'm not going to do that. As you said, we're all guilty of supporting TIF and other, mechanisms to support business development in this community, whether that's tax abatement or the like. I can get into a whole philosophical discussion around that, and what the unintended consequences of those economic development tools are. Okay. Board Bill 83 floor substitute passed. It, is currently being contended in the courts. I certainly hope that the city does its best to defend it. And my intent is not to whittle it down, every time someone has a specific, issue with their business model.
Well, I guess the reason it's kind of triggering this is the one thing that's in your board bill that says that we actually might trigger a review of this is the effect of economic activity and regional impact. And it goes through, and I guess we're supposed to have a study done. Of course, we never bothered about doing a study before we started this, but we're going to get a study done, and it says that if we have problems economically, that we're going to go ahead and we'll review this, and we might end up tweaking it. And so, you can't make this stuff up. This was in the September 29th St. Louis Business Journal. St. Louis ranked, and this is for cities, folks, this isn't for regions. St. Louis ranked near the bottom in economic growth among the 515 cities nationwide, according to a new Wallet Hub study. It ranked 490th among 515 cities and was 61st among 64 large cities. Now get this. It was out of the 64 large cities, now this is cities of 300,000 and more, we were 64th in full-time job creation. We were 64th in population growth. 64 out of 64. Now, maybe we ought to have an actual economic development policy, but when they come back and they do their analysis about whether or not we're doing okay as a region, can you tell me how to go ahead and assess? How can you be worse than 64th out of 64th? That's like being killed. That's like being stabbed, shot, and ran over then somebody throwing you off the 20-story building, and then they come up and they say, "Are you dead?" And then we'll take back a look next year and see if you're dead. It's like I don't know how much worse we can get. And of course, maybe that's why we need to have an economic development plan. I asked the assistant clerk to pass out something, and again, this is going back to doing our homework beforehand. There's a group of us that asked for what this would do to employers around here, and give us some numbers. I think the term is data-driven decision making. I asked,
Point of order, Mr. President. I spent countless hours at this microphone debating these very same issues. I'm sorry the alderman from the 17th might have been on the yellow brick road with his family at the time. But, we've already debated this ad nauseum already, and the board bill passed.
I'm going to make a point.
We need to speak about
Alderman
Bill
from
173.
17th, hold on. Please state your point of order, Alderman.
Point of order is that we are currently debating Board Bill 173, and he is getting into the nuances of Board Bill 83, which is already passed.
Alderman from the 17th, what you've walked through are the exemptions and how that impacts everything. So kind of keep your
I'll try to do that.
Centered around it.
I'll be very brief, but I'll get back to my main point here. We when we asked for information, there was virtually no information that was available, and we didn't have an economist testify. We have no information about the impact of the earnings income tax credit. We have no idea what the cost to the city is. We had no cost to the employer. Since this board bill was passed, just a couple of weeks ago, we've learned a whole lot more information. We learned that, for example, as we're being led down the yellow brick road, that Kansas City is no longer part of this deal. That nobody else in the state of Missouri is going to be part of this unless they have a statewide initiative. So we are going about this alone. We're out there by ourselves, uncharted territory. If you go ahead and read through the information that they provided us, I mean, this is what the mayor gave us. There's not one number in here that talks about how this will affect our economy locally. I went ahead and I took it upon myself, and I was going to talk about this some more, but in deference to the comments I'll make it very brief. I went through the efforts, since no one provided it for me, at the HUD's committee, and actually read the congressional budget report, and it was fascinating, the study that they did on this. They went ahead, and I had them pass this out so anybody wants to look at this. They said that 51% of the folks that have, now they distinguish between low-income households and low wages. 51% of the low wages, which is minimum wage type of workers, they belong to middle to upper middle income households. 51%, so belong to that. And then you're in a situation where the lower income households, because when their incomes go up, their earning income tax credit goes down, as so does the support that they might get, because if they're living in subsidized housing, that goes down. So 32% of their raises actually go back to the federal government. So I went ahead and I took the Bureau of Labor Statistics number, and then I called up our planning department.
From the 17th, can you hold for a second? I'm going to ask the mayor's lobbyist. I'm going to remove you from the floor. I'm not going to allow you to continue to come on the floor to pull members lobbying in the open like that. Leave this floor right now. Leave the floor. Please proceed, Alderman from the 17th.
So I went ahead out to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and there's 1.3 million people working in a region. 25% of those are in the city. That's 220,000 people. 25% are below the $11 threshold. That's 55,000 people. You go ahead, and I'm figuring that this is going to be 66 million man-hours a year, and it's going to cost St. Louis City businesses about $130 million. And of that, we didn't think about the folks who work in the city and live in the county. Now, believe it or not, I actually care about poor people. I know that people don't think that about me, and I don't want to disparage any rumors, but I really care about poor people that are in the city and not in the county. I care about poor people in Africa, in China, and all over the place, but I really care about them in the city. And in my analysis, of the $130 million, $72 million of that is going to go to county residents. I didn't know that when this bill was introduced, and when I asked the mayor for some information like that, I didn't get any. Matter of fact, our block grant, which we heard last week, was about almost $19 million that we're getting from the federal government. And you know what I'm figuring? That the low-income families are going to end up sending back to the federal government as a result of reductions of earned income tax credits? It's almost the amount of our block grant. Actually, it exceeds the amount of our block grant. Matter of fact, low-income households, based on my analysis, which I drew from the Congressional Budget Office and made some assumptions on my own because we don't have a properly funded research department, is that out of the $130 million, only about 12% of that will actually trickle down and help low-income households residing in the city. So we're sitting here, we've got all these unintended consequences. We're hearing about heartbreaking stories about 400 people, but we're sending tens of millions of dollars out to the county. I want to just read one last excerpt, and then I'm actually going to go ahead and try to make a couple points, and I have a question for the 20 aldermen from the 24th. And Alderman, I really do, like and respect you, but I want, before you sit down, and I wouldn't be doing this if the mayor was over here, I'd like to ask these questions of the mayor, but I'd like to have this on TV and get your response. Now, these are my numbers, and you may not agree with them, but they're the only numbers I've seen. And we're going to go ahead and increase the cost to city businesses by $131 million, and we're going to be sending, according to me, $72 million to county residents. So they're going to take that money, drive from their minimum wage job in St. Louis, drive out to the county, buy their meal at a McDonald's out there where they're not paying minimum wage, but they'll be stimulating that economy. And according to my numbers, that's going to be about $72 million. Now, what I want to have is an answer from you. Is that a good way for us to go ahead and use money from the city? Because the reason I'm asking that is I want to have it on TV. Because my ward last year, when they supported, when we had this thing a couple months ago for the bond issue, my ward supported it at 77%, and I want to go ahead and make sure that when the next bond issue comes over from the mayor's office, that we have I want the mayor to kind of justify this. $72 million going to county residents. So is that a good use of our money?
So I think there's a couple different points that were made. We actually did discuss this particular topic, or I guess nuance, if you will, during the many hours of debate with regard to Board Bill 83. We realize that there are people who live in the county that work in the city and vice versa. It's not just about how we're spending money, but it's also providing, in a consumer-driven economy, 70% of our GDP is generated through consumer spending. When consumers have more spending power, our economy does better. Businesses do better, and if that's an economic benefit for our region, so much the better. But here in the city, we're one of the largest economic engines in the state of Missouri, and in spite of our, woe is me mentality, we still are an economic engine in this state. We're not the size of Los Angeles, we're not the size of Chicago, but in the state of Missouri, St. Louis County, and Kansas City are the economic engines that drive economic growth in this state. And when the workers in the city, and when the workers in the county, and when the workers in Kansas City get paid more, our economies do better. And so, we did have this discussion, and unfortunately you may not have been there, for one reason or another, but this was a topic of discussion during those debates.
Well, I appreciate the fact that you said that you threw in St. Louis County and Kansas City, because neither of them are going to be part of this. And
Kansas City did pass a minimum wage ordinance bringing it to $13 an hour by 2020. And St. Louis County has introduced legislation to do so, and is now, unfortunately, because of the deadlines that were provided in House Bill 722, we have to wait for the court case before they can proceed on anything. So they did introduce a measure in St. Louis County before the effective date of August 28th. It unfortunately was not able to pass out of the county at that point in time. You know, Kansas City has actually, before the city passed one.
I am so glad you said that.
I
mean, this sometimes these things work out. So you're saying that we're all in this holding pattern. Well, I'm going to come back to that thought in just a second. But before we leave this concept about what we do with the amount of money that's impacted, and please, Alderman, I'm done asking questions. I thank you very much for your time. Before we leave this, and I have a question to ask of the Alderman from the 24th Ward, I wanted to read something from the Chairman of Economic Advisors to President Obama. And this is what she wrote. The economics of minimum wage are complicated. It is so far from obvious what an increase would accomplish. If a higher minimum wage were the only anti-poverty initiative, I would support it. It helps some low-income workers, and the costs in terms of employment and efficiency are likely small. But we could do so much better if we were willing to spend some money on a more generous earned income tax credit, would provide more support for the working poor, and would be pro-business at the same time. And pre-kindergarten education, which the President proposes to make universal, has been shown in rigorous studies to strengthen families and reduce poverty and crime. Why settle for half measures when such truly first-rate policies are well understood and ready to go? My point is, we're going to be sending $70 million or more home with folks who don't live in the city. Why not go ahead, if you want to go ahead and penalize the fast food place, let's go out, count them, divide them by $30 or $40 million, and assess them all a fee or an additional tax every year. We could go ahead, and what we could do with $150 million or $130 million is what we're going to go ahead and increase. We could go ahead and we could increase by 50% what we're spending on our children in schools. We could go ahead and we could quadruple our city's contribution to Metrolink. We could eliminate the earnings tax, which many people say is a deterrent for businesses to come into the city. A few months ago, we were down here talking to the NGA. The mayor said, my gosh, we're losing all these jobs. We've got to do something. And now all of a sudden he says, we got so many jobs, we can just go ahead and throw them away, and we don't need these low-income ones. But I stood down here and said that we're standing on an edge of the abyss. And everybody thought I was crazy, or they started saying that. Well, since then, our bond rating is a notch closer to junk. We have a report that puts us 64th out of 64th in a whole bunch of different categories. Kansas City dropped out of the lawsuit. The state went ahead, and which brings me to my real point here. I'd like to ask the question from the Alderman from the 24th.
Alderman from the 24th will yield for questions to Alderman from the 17th.
I will.
Alderman from the 17th, please proceed.
Alderman, I find myself in situations where I'm rarely in agreement with you, but I actually have newfound respect for you. I followed some of the comments during the debate, and I know deep down in your heart, you're not for this board bill. Deep down in your heart, you, not the board bill before us, but I mean the previous board bill, deep down in your heart, you want to be a flying monkey. You want to join the Alderman in the 21st, and you want to go ahead, and there's only 16 votes that passed this piece of legislation. 15 votes. And what I would like to ask you is, if we could go ahead and get one or two of those 15 to change their mind, we might be able to go ahead and take the piece, your amendment, change it a little bit, and maybe postpone the enactment of the whole thing until we see what happens in St. Louis County and happens in Kansas City. And we can go ahead and we can put that in a piece of legislation, and we can take that big, brown, stinky piece of legislation and put it on a nice piece of china, send it over to room 200, and let them go ahead and veto it if they don't like it. And we have learned a lot. We know that Kansas City, we know the county. Alderman, believe it or not, I actually respect some of the things that you do, particularly on transit issues. And sometimes I have to laugh, though. I'm not saying you're this case, but some of the transit people I kind of consider a little fanatic. They're running around, they're suggesting to do all these things for transit and worried about bike lanes and stuff like that. And I worry about economic development. And I think those are all important things. But if we don't have people living and working in the city, all those bike lanes are going to be empty. And I think that this piece of legislation is so pro-sprawl and is going to go ahead and run businesses. People aren't talking about job loss. What's going to happen is those jobs will move or they won't come into the city. It's not fair. We talked about it. If you have less than 15 employees or 500,000, it's just not fair. It's going to hurt non-for-profits. It's pro-sprawl. The county's not doing it. Kansas City's not doing it. We may end up, it's going to impact the home health care thing. We don't know what it's going to do. You talk about a collection of things that are unintended consequences. This is it. This is what happens when you go ahead and don't have committee hearings. You throw stuff together in the last week before we go. Alderman, what I'm going to ask you is would you consider holding your floor bill for a week to see if the mayor takes a dive, takes a powder when they go ahead to hear this thing next week, kind of like they did with the stadium. We were supposed to all vote on that, and miraculously we didn't get the chance to do that. And then if for some reason he doesn't take a dive, then come back, let's tweak this thing and just postpone the roll down of all this stuff until we at least know what's going on in the rest of the state. So that's my question.
So I agree with you that Board Bill 83, to some extent, is a roll of the dice, right? And I think my first comment on this was $7.65 is too low, $15 an hour in the St. Louis context is clearly too high. I think introducing that as a realistic thing was essentially a political stunt, and I think we could have. I think we passed a deeply flawed bill. 83 is a deeply flawed bill. It could have been better. It should have been better. I introduced this bill, the Board Bill 173 now, that is before us, because buried within that roll of the dice, this is the most immediate issue, the most immediate problem that Board Bill 83 caused. And so to answer the question directly, no, I would like to proceed with this bill because I don't want these 4 service providers and their employees and those families to be kind of stuck in this political back and forth. These organizations haven't done anything wrong, and I don't want to, use them as a political tool to some other end. So my personal preference is...
What did the fast food franchise do wrong?
Right. My preference is... I'll just summarize by saying my preference is, and my intent here is to pass Board Bill 173, while acknowledging that there are certainly other parts of that bill that I would still like to see changed, and I may introduce legislation on those topics in the future as well. But this was the one we could do, right? I thought we could do within this crucial initial time frame.
All right. Long-winded question, but that was my question. Thank you, Alderman.
All right. Alderwoman from the 6th.
Mr. President, members of the board, I'd like to withdraw 173 for substitute.
All right, Madam Clerk, please make note of that. 173 for substitute has been withdrawn. My assumption also is the other one from the 15th that had the second you withdraw. All right. All right, thank you, Alderwoman from the 6th. Anything further?
Yes, I'd like to introduce Board Bill 173 for substitute number 2. It's the corrected version with no one else's name on it but mine.
Is it on everyone's desk?
Yes, it is.
All right, Madam Clerk, it's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 6th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 15th. Alderwoman from the 1st.
Members of the board, just to address what the fast food industry does well, unfortunately in North St. Louis, we don't get to have many other things, but we get fast food. And if you go up on Natural Bridge, there's fast food. And so when I was contemplating what to do with this bill, went up there to try to find out what the fast food workers make. There's nobody that makes, and we have, let me just name some of them, Taco Bell, McDonald's, White Castles, Church's Chicken, Rallies, Subway, Burger King, Wendy's. I'm trying, did I miss some? Okay. Oh, and Lee's Chicken. That's thank you. Exactly right. So that's what we have. We have fast food heaven. No place you can go and sit down and get served, but most certainly fast food. In fact, my heart broke when I saw the alderman from the 22nd let a Wendy's go there, because when I did that legislation, that was for a sit-down restaurant in North St. Louis. When you go to North St. Louis, there are hardly any places. I want to commend the alderman from the 3rd, because I go down there all the time. I own property, and I eat in the cafe he's created down there and one across the street. But it's very minimum amount, so you get fast food, which is not healthy. And they pay, let's see here, let's go through what they pay. McDonald's, $8.25. Taco Bell, $8.45. Church's Chicken, $8.34. So there's no one already making. They were not concerned and jumping up and down about the minimum wage. They were looking at me like, what are you talking about, okay? We don't pay that already. So we are not trying to do anything to fast food. When you go out into some of the county areas, they're offering $10 to, I went up to a Kentucky Fried Chicken out in Maplewood. They were advertising $10 because they need workers to come. So we're not hurting fast food. But we were not talking about fast food in the first place, okay? The alderman from the 25th was correct. We were talking about the sheltered workshop. So this got to be expanded. And the only reason I'm addressing that is because that's misinformation being put out there. We're not putting people out of work. This is specifically about the sheltered workshop. Whether you're for or not, it is not what fast food did. That was in a past bill. And if we want to go back and revisit that, perhaps the alderman from the 17th can introduce an amendment or something to change that which is now law. But right now it is law, and it does not have, the amendment before us has nothing to do with fast food. But if it did, if we passed what we passed, we would not be affecting minuscule fast food, because they have to pay people more than that to come and work at fast food. So all those people who think, oh, I just don't want to work fast food, you should check it out, because they do pay wages, and a lot of them, when you talk to them, also have benefits and everything else. And for just to add something too, the former CEO of McDonald's started out as a fast food worker. He's a black man who worked himself all the way up to being the CEO of McDonald's. So we are not trying to villainize fast food.
Alderman from the 2nd.
Mr. President, members of the board, I rise in opposition to this floor substitute. I'm glad it did change, because I am in support of the original board bill. I want to thank Alderwoman Green and Alderman Carter, who came to a workshop, Worth Industries, in my ward Tuesday at a very short notice. I appreciate that. And I know that was also an area that Alderman Carter actually represented. And Alderwoman Green can tell you, when you go to Worth Industries, there's a lot of love there. You're greeted, you're hugged, they're introduced themselves. It's a wonderful workshop that's been in my ward for 20 years. You may or may not have noticed it. It's a large, simple, white warehouse that's 38,000 square feet. Not very pretty. Matter of fact, I gave them an awning, which I need to replace on my visit when I went back Tuesday. And I remember, working with different businesses in and around Worth Industries, and every time they wanted to open a new business, I always said, hey, Worth Industry is there. Is there anything you can do to help them? Whether it was to help them with dock use. I know they have had some vandalism through the years. They've had theft, or they stole equipment there. And even when you walk in, I think some of the changes I remember when I went back this time is they have a reception area where you can actually, there's a window there. You can't get in unless you state who you're there to see. And when you walk in, it's a very modest dining room table there that someone donated to them. I'm going to have to probably come down and see you all for a Make a Difference Day. I know I could probably spruce up that table myself with some paint and some crack paint finish to make it look better. But you don't notice many renovations that have happened over the last 16 years since I've been there. I'm also, as Alderman Rhodey, I don't have the privilege to serve on many committees here at the board, and so I was very busy when this first was introduced, and I was waiting to come to a hearing to hear about it and hear the testimony, but unfortunately, I didn't get that opportunity. When I came here in the special session to actually vote for the bill, I was actually on the fence. I hadn't had my mind made up. And to be perfectly honest, Alderwoman Angracia kept marching by my desk saying, "We need you. Would you be okay to do this compromise?" and so forth. And I had no problem with compromising, because that's what I think we do as legislators. You have to compromise. I was told by Alderwoman Green on Tuesday, which I actually had breakfast with someone that Tuesday and learned that there was a floor substitute, possibly that this person is not even associated with the Board of Aldermen, so that was the first I heard of it. And Alderwoman Green said that Alderwoman Angracia was working on a floor substitute. So she kind of explained it to me a little bit about what the bill might possibly have in it. I said, well, will I have the opportunity to see it? She said, yes, it's circulating. I looked for emails, waited for the bill, never did get it. I did say at that time to Alderwoman Green, you know, I think I questioned why we didn't get to see it before, and she said she didn't think that the chairman would have an opportunity, would give an opportunity to have it heard in committee. And, you know, I expressed to her that I would have been happy to have tried to talk a little sense into the chairman. I've been sitting next to the man for many years, and yes, he does have an opinion on things, but I would have at least tried to see if we could have got that legislation heard in committee. But I really would have wished I'd had opportunity. I know the Alderwoman from the 28th asked the Alderman from the 24th if, you know, the question of Paraquat and there being different organizations, and did we ask first? Well, a couple of weeks ago, or 2 or 3 weeks ago, when we voted on the minimum wage bill, there was a sign there that said, "Did you ask us?" And my question is, and in meeting with Worth Industries this week and talking to them this morning, no one has asked them about this floor substitute. We also had a couple of family members that were there to meet us at Worth Industries to talk to the alderpersons, and I did also invite Alderwoman Angracia to be able to come in the workshop to talk about what that workshop meant to their loved one or the person they were caring for and to them. And they said that it gives that person, their loved one, an opportunity to go to work every day, which I will say they do not want to miss work. Very rarely late. Matter of fact, when they came down here for the hearing, some of them were confused as to why they weren't at work and why they were here. They wanted to be at work. There was a gentleman there, so apparently it's been over 20 years because he's been working there 21 years. And every day there, all the time. And we got there at about 2 o'clock, and their time to go off was 2:30. So we went into the workshop to talk, to see the people, see how things were working. At 2:30, Alderman Carter was a little late. I think he almost got ran over on the way in the door, because when that time clocks, they know it's time to go, but they know when it's time to go to work, and they're there and they're reliable. And this is something that they look forward to. The family member said that it gives me the opportunity while they're at work for me to run errands, do things I need to do in the household. It gives me a little freedom. It gives me a little personal time. But mainly, most of all, it gives the workshop worker the independence, the social aspect of it. I was reading the email that came overnight, and it said that, yes, their daughter had got a job at the airport and was working there, was recommended to actually be moved on and get further advancement. But socially, she had an issue and was very unhappy there. And I asked Maxine, do some of your workers go on to get other jobs? And she said, yes, but a lot of times they end up coming back. What I'm trying to say is we have two groups and you do it as an alderperson. I have, and I don't want to compare, but I have almost 13 miles of bike trail in my ward. There are various bike organizations. Before BPS tried to coordinate with all the bike associations, they were all trying to get permits to do certain things, and another organization came to get a permit, and they said, well, wait a minute, we already gave a permit to this organization, and they started to kind of have a little bit of a conflict between all of them, until we got them together at the table to talk about what it is they want to do and their plans and so forth, and come to some sort of plan together. I also am very active, as everyone knows, with animal organizations. And you have different organizations that like each other. They have their thoughts of each other's group, criticisms of each other's group. They all have different goals, different issues, different objectives. The point is, though, they're all trying to do what it is they want to do to help better animal life in the world. And some people don't understand that. But my question is, when this floor substitute was being discussed, did anyone ask the workshops? What would the impact be? What was told to us was that when they get their paycheck, sometimes the Social Security benefits are reduced. Sometimes they will go up. If you increase minimum wage, of course, their checks, their benefits will be reduced. Yes, they will have an impact on their health care. Yes, as they have told us, I can't speak for all of the organizations, but more than likely they will have to lay off half of their workers. There are 9 employees at Worth Industries. There are 2 part-time. And as I mentioned, this organization is not filthy rich. They don't get a lot of money. They're not putting it in their own pockets. But there are times seasonally when contracts aren't coming in as frequent, particularly in the summertime during vacation. And those contracts are lower. That's where the state money comes in and helps them out. And in some cases, in some years, they've had a deficit where they were actually in the negative. We don't know if that will increase. We don't know if DESA will increase that for them. We don't know the impact that this will have. Only we can speculate, just like we don't know exactly the impact minimum wage will have. But hopefully it'll be positive. I ask you to vote against this. And for 375 workers, I understand that we made a great impact here by implementing minimum wage to help many workers in the city of St. Louis make a living wage. But this particular board bill, sponsored by Aldermen from the 24th, will exempt those workshops. And possibly we can look into other funding outside or increase funding or so forth. But if you do not support this board bill that Alderman Ogilvie has today, you will have a serious impact on these workshops. Maybe 1 or 2 may be able to survive, but the other 2 may not. And I'm going to tell you, the workers at the workshop know which wards they live in, they know their precincts, and they're very adamant with their caretakers and their relatives that it is voting day. And they do vote. And they are aware of what's going on in the news. Felicia, who's not here because she went to go get some tea, told me to let Hillary Clinton know about what's going on at the workshop and let our president know to not forget them. Now, I'm very flattered that she would think I was that high on the poll. But she did understand that we were elected officials and we were dealing with their future and we were dealing with their independence and we were dealing with their families instead of sitting at home and not having anything to do. There are some families that have pulled their loved one out of the workshop because their Social Security checks decreased or their benefits decreased. They would rather have that check with that solid number in it on a monthly basis than to see it decrease. Some understand that. But there have been families that have been pulled out because they just want to get that constant check every month. This is something that I tried to be very sensitive with my language over the last week, and that's why I wanted to meet with the family so that I can understand what this means to them. It gives the family member, the caretaker, an ability to give their family member a part of the workforce. This is not competitive jobs. This is not competitive wages. The people that work here do not go and apply for a job. They're referred by caseworkers. They are paid according to, for instance, if I can put 100 boxes together in a day, it may take 19 workshop workers to put 100 boxes together. It's done with support from the staff to help them be able to conquer and do their job. And at the end of the day, when they were leaving, they had these little pink cards. And I asked Mr. Orr, what is that? He goes, that's the number of things that they accomplished for that day. So if it was 100 boxes and they did 3 or they did 15 or they did 20, they gave that to the staff person so they would know what they did for that day. This is not a living wage that they're paid. This is a commensurate rate. This is not about competing on your workforce. This is about giving some people some stability, some independence, some socialization, and giving some families the opportunity to give that to their loved one. I ask that you not support this floor substitute, please.
Alderman from the 9th.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, I want to thank the Alderwoman from the 6th for removing my name from the floor substitute because, I mean, nobody talked to the Alderman from the 9th either about this. I heard a little bit of rumor about it and asked the Alderman from the 24th, and he said he's hearing that something's going to be out there. So, but anyway, I can't really top what the Alderman from the 2nd Ward, stated, but I want to, make a few points. 375 people, maybe another 375, 400 parents, guardians, grandparents, that are involved here. I mean, it affects a small number of people, but it's important, and it's important to them. And what I'd like to see is the Alderwoman from the 6th Ward withdraw her floor substitute, and let's get Board Bill 173 passed out, because the one thing we do have is we do have time. I mean, if they want to sit down and include the workshops, I mean, we do have time. We don't have a state mandate as an excuse to get something passed out right now. I don't see the big hurry in it, and I don't know where the votes are. It's kind of a hard, read to take. But we need to give these people peace of mind for a time until at least they can get at the table also and try to get something worked out to see if it, will really affect the benefits, which I think it will, or it won't, or to get something worked out with them. Even though it's a small percent, 4 workshops, do we need to run them to the county? Because people say, well, that's not going to happen. Well, it could happen. And a year from now, if we pass this, if it would pass, which I'm strongly against the floor substitute, they might not be here. And then my constituents that work in workshops would have to make either arrange for transportation or drive to the county. We don't have to do that. We don't have to go there. This can be dealt with. There's no mandate. There's no time. It can be dealt with, and we could probably get a lot more homework done. So I would strongly urge my colleagues to, vote against this floor substitute. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman from the 10th.
I didn't know if the Alderman from the 21st was standing before me. Oh, no. We'll let the beauty go before the age. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Alderman from the 21st.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wonder if the sponsor of the floor substitute will yield the questions.
Alderman from the 6th, will you yield questions to the Alderman from the 21st?
I will.
Alderman from the 21st, please proceed.
Thank you. I think I was described earlier as a wicked witch from the West, so I hate to add more negative, more negativity here. But my question, Alderwoman, is what is today's date?
October 2nd, I believe.
October 2nd. Under current state law, can municipalities make any changes to minimum wage law?
We're amending a law that's currently on the books, so yes, we can.
We're passing a new ordinance, though, right? This is a new bill. This is a new law, and it tries to change the city law. But can we make any changes to minimum wage law under state law now?
I had a conversation with our city councilor about this, and he believes we can.
Huh. All right, so he's in court right now on the previous bill, so we'll see. That's all my questions for you. What I worry here is that we have already shot ourselves in the foot. Under current state law, past August 28th, municipalities can't make any changes to minimum wage law. And so what I worry, again, is that because of how we mishandled the previous situation, we have now put hundreds of people, if not thousands, in peril, even beyond the potential job losses related to the normal minimum wage. And then furthermore, even if we were able to pass this thing, now I don't support at all the floor substitute, because I think this is another haphazard way to handle a very complicated and complex issue that has many, many potential unintended consequences. But I do agree with the intent of the original Board Bill 173, which is to repair some of the damage done with the original ordinance. Now, I remember when we discussed the previous board bill, I remember directly questioning the sponsor, and I asked him, are you going to come back and fix this mistake, which we all acknowledge is a mistake? He said yes, and he stalled. He did not introduce a bill when we came back. And so I applaud the Alderman from the 24th for picking that up and running with it. And it was a very simple thing to fix, or at least to try to fix it if we can legally still do it, is to simply put that exemption back in there, the exemption that has always been in place and exists every other place in the land. Just to fix that and put it back. And instead, the Alderman from the 6th and some of her friends are again trying to hijack this process, hijack his bill, introduces a floor substitute which completely rewrites that simple bill and tries to introduce very complicated changes to an existing industry without any testimony, didn't do it in the committee level, so we didn't have an opportunity to have anybody come and testify on this language, have anybody come offer numbers on what the economic impact would be on this, or anything related to this, unintended, intended, what have you. So we, again, go around an entire established process and try to write very complicated law on the floor of the Board of Aldermen, and we don't even have an attorney here to be able to tell us if we're doing this legally or not. So I just don't think this is the way we should do this. And we've already made this mistake before. And the judge will rule on whether that was a legal or illegal act within the next few days. But in the meantime, I think we should pass 173 to try to minimize the damage that we did a few weeks ago and to hope for the best in minimizing that. But if anybody wants to have a conversation about completely changing this industry, it should be done through the normal process. You should have both sides being able to come and testify for or against and explain their sides. But to totally ignore those folks that came down here and did show up in support of 173, a lot of families, a lot of people said they were being affected by this. And they stood there and they asked us to change it. And we passed out of committee a bill that would change it, or at least try to. And then for us to then sneak around them and introduce a bill today which completely changes that is irresponsible. It's irresponsible. And that is not good legislation. That's not good legislating. That is not representing those folks who took their time out of work to come down here and to testify on Board Bill 73. For us just to come and hijack that process on the floor and completely change that language is not fair. When will they have an opportunity to speak on this? After we perfected it? After it becomes law again? So they'll have to send it back to the courts and let the courts work it out? That's not the way to do this. And I'd urge everybody to vote against this floor substitute and to support 173, which I hope can help fix some of the damage we did a few weeks ago. But quite frankly, that probably isn't legal for us to pass anymore.
All right, thank you, Alderman. Alderman from 10th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. Again, I will not be sleeping for a week or two because I find myself in complete agreement with the Alderman from the 21st. I'm losing weight. Thank you. My wife appreciates that. Alderman from the 17th brought up the fact that this is like the Wizard of Oz. It's more like 2001: A Space Odyssey to me. And Hal, the computer, has taken over and gone nuts. The politics that are occurring here at this level, you're taking, once again, this 62-square-mile island and trying to make the world follow us. You're trying to make the county follow us, they won't. You're trying to make the state follow us, they won't. You're taking this and acting, well, what's going on here makes George McGovern look like a Republican. This is out of the blue. You're taking this little bill that we're just trying to fix and help these workshops in the city of St. Louis. I have one in my ward. Industrial Aid is right there. These folks have been at my business. They talk to me. They can't explain how bad this is going to be for them. Now, I've stood behind a bar for the last 27 years, and I've heard some pretty silly conversations. I thought coming out here might change that, but it hasn't. And there's no alcohol involved, I hope, in most of these. But the root of the problem is passing this bill in this city, once again, as I stated last time, is so wrong. You can't just take and regionalize these workshops, force these people to do something that is not required as a region in the county or at state level. They will close up, they will move. You will have vacant buildings in your ward. You are doing something very wrong if you support this floor substitute. There is no thought process. It is arrogant. It is wrong. I again stand in support of Alderman from the 24th, my neighbor, even though he put a bike lane where I didn't want one. So I urge you to vote down this floor substitute and do the right thing. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Alderman from the 22nd.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I remember having the debate of the previous bill that we passed. I recall asking the alderman from the 25th if he would be committed to putting the exemption back in, and I tied my vote to his commitment to put the exemption back in. And what I shared was that I have a first cousin, basically, who works with a sheltered workshop, and for many, many years, and it gave her a sense of independence. I made the vote. I got to my office later on that afternoon, and I got a chilling voicemail message from a constituent pleading that I not vote for it because of the circumstances of her son participating in a sheltered workshop. But unfortunately, I had to call Ms. McLeod back and tell her, I'm sorry, I voted for it. However, I do have a commitment that the exemption will be placed back in it. I wish I had brought her letter because she took the time not to just call me and thank me, but she wrote me a letter and she detailed again why it was very important that they should have the exemption. Because not only is it her son, but she's taking care of her father. It was not my intention to come back and vote on a bill that had layers of exemptions or that's been presented as the floor substitute has been presented. And I also would point out that in the history of my 12 years being here, I've never seen a floor substitute that totally strikes out a bill and introduces basically a whole new bill. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I was wondering if that's something that conflicts with a rule, but I couldn't find it. But I thought that was real interesting to basically just strike out a whole bill and introduce a new bill. But anyway, again, I want to support the original floor substitute because, you know, that was a commitment that was made to me by the Alderman of the 25th Ward. And I do want to applaud the Alderman of the 25th Ward because I did get correspondence from him that he was working with the whole industry to try to come up with a great solution so that we can amend this bill and make it right for everybody. And I've listened to testimony about Paraquat, which is a phenomenal organization, and I've certainly listened to the great orator by the Alderman from the 2nd Ward who intimately knows this, you know, better than some, as well as the Alderman from the 10th who actually have them in their ward. And I listened and I just rehearsed that voicemail message from the mother, and I rethink about the letter that I received. And I just think the right thing to do is to just put the exemption back in and not support the amendment as it has been presented to us. And again, my vote was on a commitment that we would do exactly what the Alderman from the 24th has proposed that we do. So anything short of that really questions the fidelity of our relationships here at the Board of Aldermen by people that want to do otherwise. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Alderman from the 1st.
Mr. President, members of the board, I sit right next to the Alderman from the 25th, and as you all will recall, I actually talked on the floor about their commitment to me to come back and work with this, and that if they did not, I would have a problem. But I want to say they are mischaracterizing what the Alderman from the 25th said. He did not say he would put the exemption back in. That is not what he said. I would challenge anybody to go back and play. He said he was committed to working on it, and he specifically said that did not mean that he was going to support an exemption, but he wanted to look at working on it. That's what, and he would be working with anybody. So he did not, he is being mischaracterized, and I would suggest you go back and look at that tape. He didn't say that. Now, maybe that's what you understood, Alderman from the 22nd, but he did not say that. Now, maybe if he had a private conversation with you, but on this floor, that is not what he said, okay? And I was sitting here, and I challenged him because I had conversations going back and forth, and all of us have been lobbied, but it's not fair to mischaracterize what people said as though that they obtained your vote fraudulently, okay? I would also like the Alderman from, I would request that the Alderman from the 21st yield.
Alderman from the 21st, will you yield for questioning to the Alderman from the 1st?
Absolutely.
All right, Alderman, please proceed.
Alderman, I heard you, and I want to make sure. You said something, I think, that to the fact that the state law passed on August the 28th that prohibited us from changing this because the law got passed on the 28th. Is that what you said?
No, the law was actually passed much sooner than that. But the law explicitly says that no law shall be made after August 28th that shall change the minimum wage.
And then, and then what happened to that law that got passed?
It was vetoed, and then the veto was overturned, and it became the law of the land.
Okay, and so when was it?
So currently the law of the land. The state
first of all,
statute has that date in it.
Wait. Let me ask the questions, okay? So my question is, so it was vetoed, and when was it vetoed, do you know?
The date it was vetoed? I don't know.
Okay, but so when the veto was overturned, was that after August the 28th?
No.
So you're saying that the veto was...
Oh, the veto was overturned after that. Yes. It was not vetoed afterwards. The veto was overturned after that.
And are you familiar with laws that we have on our books that said that you cannot make retroactive laws?
Yes.
Okay. And so this law that said on August 28th, which I have always talked to people about, that says this is going to go into effect August 28th. It didn't go into effect August 28th because it could not, because the governor had vetoed it. And so now the argument is that even though it didn't go into effect by August the 28th, by us overriding the veto, we're going to go back, and that's what people are claiming, that we could go back and say that this is the law of the land as of August the 28th, even though it was not legal at that time. Is that the argument you're making?
So whether it goes into effect August 28th or in September when they overturn the veto, it definitely is in effect now before we change the law. So it is definitely the law now.
Okay, but I want to stick with facts. I have no problem with what you're saying, except for that I have never, and I have argued with people, and we've talked to people and lawyers, you cannot make retroactive laws. So when the governor vetoed that, it did not go into effect on the 28th. I argued with the people who I supported, saying that we didn't need to do it as fast because it was not a law of August 28th. So I just want to say that that's a mischaracterization to me, that it was not the law. But
when do you argue the fact that it is the law now?
No. I'm just saying it was not August the 28th, okay?
Okay, but it's the law now.
I have no problem with that, but that's not what you said, so I wanted to clear that up. That was not correct. It is the law now. It's been overridden, and so they changed it. First I want to just address a little bit. Everybody's saying, oh, cities should not be able to do this. We were able to do this up until they changed it and took it away. We've been able to do this, and that is this being changed minimum wage for a while now. This was nothing new. It's just that whenever the city starts to exercise their own autonomy, the very people, and I'm talking about the Republicans who always argue to the federal states, get your hands off of us, don't touch us, because the states have rights. But when the city starts exercising their rights, those people who argue local and that we should be able to have states' rights, and they gave the city of St. Louis a local right. And then when we started to use it, and this was all, in fact, I want to say, I believe, because there is a great Republican majority that wants to see the state of Missouri be right to work, okay? So what they do is they continue to chip at anything that smacks of unions and wages.
Please.
To the floor substitute.
Alderman from the first, please keep your comments relevant to the floor substitute.
It is relevant to what was already said by the Alderman from the 21st about this being irresponsible and things like that, okay? It's not irresponsible. It wasn't that we made up a new rule. This was something that we had a right to do.
And I understand that. I think you've made that point.
No, I hadn't even finished my thought when he got up and said that. If you let him make that point, then I want to be rebut, okay?
I'm with you.
Okay, that's all. I wasn't going to be any further. What I first made a point was that he was wrong that it did not go into effect August the 28th. Absolutely. And my second thing was to get to, it is not irresponsible to try to practice something that was your right that somebody just took away from you. They're acting like we made up this thing of, oh, we want to do minimum wage. We had it all along. It just was taken away from us. So it's not irresponsible to have wanted to use something that we've had all along. If you've been making $5 an hour or $10 an hour and somebody says now you can only make $4, nobody would argue that you were being irresponsible because you still wanted to make what you made. And so it is not irresponsible to say the city has a right to exercise their authority that they had to make minimum wage up until the last few days, okay? It didn't get changed a long time ago. And it is in court. And so the Alderman, I was going to say, the Alderman brings up what I had not thought about, which I was getting to, interesting a point about if we can even do this. So I don't have a problem saying that. When I think about that it is now in law, that is going to be a good question, and I don't have any questions for the Alderman from the 21st. I have a question for the Alderwoman from the 6th now.
Alderwoman from the 6th, will you yield for questions to the Alderwoman from the 1st?
Yes. Alderwoman, you said that the city councilor said that he thought we could still do this, and did he give a reason why he thought we could do this?
Sorry, I just want to make sure I'm accurate since there's been a little bit of misinformation.
Because I just really hadn't thought about that till he brought it up.
It's my understanding that we can bring people up to minimum wage, just not over the state or federal.
Okay. So since they are, okay, all right, that's fair. All right, okay, and I got to pull that, now I want to pull that law. I have no further questions. Thank you. I'm going to look at it myself.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion on the floor substitute? Any further discussion on the floor substitute? Alderwoman from the 15th.
Would the Alderwoman from the 6th please yield for questions?
Alderwoman from the 6th will yield for questions to the Alderwoman from the 15th. Alderwoman from the 15th, please proceed.
Could you explain for us a little bit of the rationale behind the floor substitute and the conversations that you had with people on both sides of the debate discussion?
Sure, absolutely. I think there are valid points on both sides of the argument. And I had conversations with 3 out of the 4 sheltered workshops, as well as members of the advocacy community and with Paraquad. Done a lot of my own research and reading, and I think the writing is on the wall with respect to the momentum that is at the federal level and in other states, and that we should be, although it's difficult for change, sometimes it's inevitable, and I think we should start to have conversations now about how we can transition folks, not leaving anyone behind, and this floor substitute allows us 7 years to do that, along with a task force. of people who are appointed from various walks of life within this community for us to make sure that we are getting to the place we want to be and not adversarially affecting anyone. There's also another provision in Board Bill 83 that passed that does provide an economic impact study, of which this will now be a part if this floor substitute is passed.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, the task force that is created through the floor substitute will allow for all parties who have a stake in this conversation to be at the table in making these decisions. And to the best of your knowledge, that is not something that has really happened thus far.
That's accurate.
Okay. Can you outline for us some of the people that will sit on that committee?
Sure. There will be the mayor or his appointee, the president of the Board of Aldermen and his appointee, member of a sheltered workshop or their parent or guardian, a member of the community that has transitioned from a sheltered workshop into an integrated work environment, member from the Senate Bill 40 board, which is DD Resources right now in St. Louis City. We have a unique funding mechanism here in Missouri, which allows for counties to fund sheltered workshops, which is not something typical in other places.
So when we've heard a couple of people arguing that we shouldn't be doing this at a local level, can you explain a little bit more how the county system works for sheltered workshops?
Sure. So there's a property tax that is assessed on residents, property owners of St. Louis City and in other counties that have sheltered workshops in Missouri, which provides a significant portion of money to sheltered workshops across the state.
And what would be the starting point for wages under your floor substitute?
It would start at $4.50 beginning January 1st of 2016. The average wage right now is between $2 and $4 for sheltered workshops. So I don't think that it's going too far too fast.
And so then before there's another wage increase, how long would the committee have to work and look at some of these issues before there was another increase?
1 year.
Okay. No further questions. Thank you.
Alderman from 24th.
Thank you. I'm going to renew my point of order that I made when the motion was made for this floor substitute. I'm going to read from the rules this time. These are our rules. We approve them. Let's recall. This is Rule 36. It deals with amending motions. So I made a motion to perfect Board Bill 173. Alderwoman from the 6th made a motion to introduce a floor substitute for Board Bill 173. So here's Rule 36. It talks about amending motions. You read down and it says, provided, however, that no bill shall be so amended in its passage as to change its original purpose. That's our rule. My bill, Board Bill 173, is the bill to exempt sheltered workshops from the city's municipal minimum wage ordinance. The floor substitute is a bill to make sheltered workshops comply with the city's minimum wage ordinance on a slightly different time frame. So I contend that this floor substitute is not properly before us and should not be voted on. This motion is Alderman from the 6th motion, despite the fact that we've been talking about it for 2 hours, is not properly before the board to vote on. I would like that point of order noted. Obviously, the president makes the determination on these things, but I don't think we should vote on this.
Yeah, and I think you raise a good point, Alderman, and I think you can look at this from two ways. I think the intent of all of this is what do we do as it relates to minimum wage concerning sheltered workshops or the disabled, and in that vein, in that broader subject matter, which is what I stated earlier, they are, this is properly before us now. But I do see your point. I think you make a valid point when you look at it, much more narrowly as it relates to whether they should be added or exempt. But in a much broader context, what you are doing is you're amending the original bill that her change would also affect. So,
okay. As always,
give me a second on that. I'm thinking about. State it one more time for me.
Okay. So my point of order is that we're violating, that the Alderwoman from the 6th motion violates Rule 36. And Rule 36 considers...
I know what Rule 36 is.
Okay. So no bill shall be so amended in its passage
to change its original
purpose.
Yeah.
The purpose of Board Bill 173 is to create an exemption for sheltered workshops from our minimum wage ordinance. The purpose of the floor substitute is to apply the minimum wage ordinance to sheltered workshops. I think that is literally it's 180 degrees from my intent with Board Bill 173. I don't think it's a small detour left or right. I think it's a 180 degree turn. So that's my point of order, that we've changed the purpose of the bill with this floor substitute.
I think your point of order is. Did you have something to add, Alderman from 11th before?
Mr. President, if granted permission, I would like to speak of the point of order.
Oh, please.
I am on the side of the Alderman from the 24th. However, his point of order would be untimely.
Absolutely.
When you permitted the introduction and the motion on the floor substitute number 2, we in effect were considering that. I think that when the we group got together this week, and doggone it, I wasn't invited again. But the we group is a dangerous group, and they just decided that they would employ their poetic license. But you know what? This is, for those of us that try to follow this, one could make an argument that the floor substitute we're about to vote on is in fact not a true substitute. And that's probably something that, and the chair ruled that, that it was in fact a true substitute, and it's now before us, that I think we should vote it up or down and then proceed with whatever happens. But I think the Alderman of the 24's point of order had been raised in a timely fashion. It would have been more interesting. But we've been debating this for, I think, over an hour. So that would be my 2 cents worth, which probably may not be worth 2 cents, but I appreciate it.
No.
Thank you, Mr. President.
No, and you stated it exactly the way I was, the direction I was headed. I think you have a valid point when you look at it, through that narrow lens. But the point of order is not timely at this point because it is before us. So we'll have an opportunity to vote this up or down.
Sure.
Moving forward.
Close but no cigar. Can I?
Yeah.
That's fine. Can I? Do I still have the floor?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Before I made the point of order, I also wanted to make very briefly, and then I hope that we do vote on this, and then move on to voting on Board Bill 173. And I'm going to piggyback a little bit on the Alderman from the 21st comments, and I think as well on the Alderman from the 17th comments. It's a question of how we make policy. And the floor substitute creates a task force. Maybe a task force is a good idea, but it's a little late for a task force when you've already passed the policy. If a task force is a good idea, let's create a task force, and let's give the task force time to study the issue and make a recommendation, and then maybe we can enact policy based on that recommendation. But it's backwards. It's not good policy making. It's not a good approach for us to create a policy and then create a task force that we say will look at the issue. That's backwards. So that's why I think, I urge my colleagues to vote against the floor substitute for this bill. It's just not good policy making. There's a lot of irresponsible things going on here. And with that, I hope we take a vote shortly, and then we can move on to the bill itself. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? Alderman from 21st.
Thank you. To the Alderman from the 24th point a minute ago, I do agree with him that we are violating our rules by allowing a vote on a bill that completely changes its intent. But that's also a violation of the city charter, which also states that no bill shall be so amended as its passage as to change its original purpose. So even if we were to adopt this floor substitute, and if by some chance it was to become law, I am very sure it would be thrown out, and along with our intent to change the previous ordinance and to minimize that impact. So I think the passage of the floor substitute endangers our entire attempt here to try to save this industry from disaster.
All right, thank you, Alderman. Alderman from 20th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I'd like to talk just a little bit about the floor substitute. I rise in confliction as well. I echo the alderman from the 28th and the 25th. This is a very complicated issue. I believe that all St. Louisans deserve the right to earn a living wage. That's why I voted in favor of Board Bill 83. But we clearly have experts on both sides of the disability community, trusted experts in this field that are on both sides of this issue. And so I would like to ask the alderman from the 6th Ward to rise for questions, please.
Alderman from 6, will you yield for questions to the alderman from 20th?
I will. Thank you. My first question is, does the task force have the charge to quantify any changes to benefits such as Medicaid, Social Security that would be experienced through the rise of minimum wage?
One of the items listed is, in fact, for them to look into that, yes.
But would they be charged with quantifying those changes?
They could be. There are a list of items that are specifically spelled out, but it also states that it's including but not limited to, so anything that we would want to request of them could be requested.
Okay. And if it's determined that the changes in benefits would negatively impact this vulnerable population, would the task force then have the rights to change the way this phase in, or how it would phase in, essentially?
A task force cannot change an ordinance, but the board can.
So the task force would then just advise the board then if the effects would be very negative on benefits or other aspects?
That's accurate.
And so then the board would then go back and then change legislation to reflect those negative impacts?
I think that's accurate and similar to what we passed with the minimum wage bill.
Okay. So to echo, I can't remember everybody's number here. 24th Ward Alderman's concern about passing legislation before looking into it in great detail. As a mother, I've been appealed to by so many mothers of family, of workshop workers, and I'm inclined to trust parents and what they believe is right for their children. And even though this is a very complicated issue, I'm just not comfortable changing our current exemption status without having the task force really take a look at those benefits and those really important, necessary things for our sheltered workshop workers. Thank you so much for looking into this. I think it's admirable. I think I very much support changes on a federal level, and I will continue to work with you guys on ways that we can make this a more fair and just wage for everybody in St. Louis, but I am very hesitant to pass legislation without doing that due diligence first. Thank you.
All right. Alderman from the 11th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to try to be succinct. There's a provision in our state constitution that says the title to a bill shall contain one subject matter. The minimum wage proposal in Jefferson City happened to have a provision in there that outlawed plastic bags. You get my drift here? So to my point, I think that the floor substitute is ill-advised, and I know the We Group is pushing the study commission. I think we need another study commission generally, like we need, a reduction in our bond rating. Having said that, it was admirable, but that the floor substitute is too far-reaching. I think the problem here is there are good people on both sides of this, and we're trying to help. We're trying to help people that labor in a vineyard in a very, very difficult realm. But I think the right thing to do, and again, you don't boo me publicly, we can always come back, but I think the thing to do is to reject this floor substitute, do what we told the sheltered workshop people we were going to do. And the preponderance of people that I heard from, and they're all doing it through that little machine that keeps beeping every time I set it behind my kitchen table. We call it a laptop. The preponderance of people that are weighing in to me are in fact in support of the alderman from the 24th original bill, and that's going to be my intention. And again, I think the element of surprise sometimes is good. Had I known, and I'm not, I happen to have the utmost respect for the we group. I'm just learning their names. I like the we group, but had I had this yesterday afternoon, my point of order would have certainly been along the same lines as the alderman from the 24th. I just didn't, but it's the legislative process. But I think we should, again, defeat the floor substitute and do the right thing now, what I think is for the right thing now, and then we can always, again, this is an industry that is much too delicate for us to make a mistake. Thank you, Mr. President.
Any further discussion? Just as one more point of clarification on the original point of order, when you look at both of these, the floor substitute and the original board bill, both of them concerns wages. So the original board bill is an attempt to remove that section to impact the underlying wages of those workers. And the floor substitute is an effort to adjust the scale to impact the wages of those workers. So that's one way to look at it. Another way is the way the alderman from the 24th outlined, that it's either an exemption or not an exemption. So that's the fine line when you look at whether it changes the original intent or not. So in my original decision, it was based on the wages, because both of them are targeting the wages of those workers one way or the other. That's ultimately what both of them are targeting. Alderman from the 6th, you're recognized to close.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. Thank you to all my colleagues as well for all of your testimony today. I realize this issue is not without controversy. The thing that troubles me the most is that we see what's happening on the horizon at the federal and state level, and we should am I okay?
Yeah, continue.
That we can be a part of a conversation for the first time in Missouri. We have 7 years in this provision to get ourselves to a place where we know the federal government is leading us anyway. And I do know that parents make the best decisions for their children. I have 3 children of my own. I'm definitely very respectful of that. I will say also that change is not easy, and in any of the states that have already implemented changes or are moving through changes, parents have the same worries, and studies have shown that once the process is well on its way and things are working out, that everyone is much more comfortable, which is just what happens with change. And that being said, I renew my motion.
All right, it's been moved and seconded that we introduce floor substitute for Board Bill 173. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Flowers. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderman Coulter. No. Alderman Conway. Alderman Ortman. No. Alderman Vollmer. No. Alderman Villa. No. Alderman Arnowitz. No. Alderwoman Murphy. No. Alderwoman Howard. No. Alderwoman Green.
Aye.
Alderwoman Behringer? Alderman Rhodey? Alderman Kennedy? Alderwoman Davis? Alderwoman Spencer? Alderman French? Alderman Boyd? Alderman Vaccaro? Alderman Ogilvie? Alderman Cone? Alderman Williamson? Alderman Carter? Alderwoman Cruzen? President Reed?
No.
Alderwoman Hubbard? Alderman Conway? Alderwoman Davis? Seven aye votes, 19 no votes.
By a vote, you fail to sustain the motion. The Alderman from the 6th, floor substitute for Board Bill 173 has failed. Now we're back to the original Board Bill. Alderman from the 24th, you recognize.
Well, I think we probably understand the issue pretty well at this point, and I want to thank my colleagues for offering their perspectives, and I think especially thank families and employees of shelter workshops who've opened the doors to let everybody understand what they do and how they do it in the last couple of weeks. So thank you. So I'll just summarize by saying a yes vote now, a vote in favor of Board Bill 173 is an acknowledgement of the important work that sheltered workshops do, providing services and employment to individuals with disabilities in the city of St. Louis. It is a system that, as you have heard, many families believe in, buy into, and as one parent said to me, this isn't broken, why are you trying to fix it? This works for us. So I would urge my colleagues to vote in favor of Board Bill 173. Thank you.
All right.
Motion, please.
All right. Roll call. It's been moved and seconded that we perfect Board Bill number 173. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Flowers. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderman Coulter. Alderman Conway. Alderman Ortman. Alderman Vollmer. Alderman Villa. Alderman Arnowitz. Alderwoman Murphy. Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Green. Alderwoman Behringer. Alderman Rhodey. Alderman Kennedy. Alderwoman Davis. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman French. Alderman Boyd. Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Ogilvie. Alderman Cone. Alderman Williamson. Alderman Carter. Alderwoman Cruzen. President Reed.
Aye.
Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderman Conway. Alderwoman Davis. $21 aye votes, 5 no votes.
By your vote, you sustain the motion. Alderman from the 24th and perfected Board Bill number 173.
That's the extent of board bills for perfection.
Alderman from the 24th, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. President. For the purposes of moving Board Bill 173 to the
third reading
and final passage calendar, I move that we suspend the rules.
It's been moved by the Alderman from 24th, seconded by the Alderman from 22nd. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Flowers. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderman Coulter. Alderman Conway. Alderman Ortman. Alderman Vollmer. Alderman Villa. Alderman Arnowitz. Alderwoman Murphy. Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Green. Alderwoman Behringer. Alderman Rhodey. Alderman Kennedy. Alderwoman Davis. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman French. Alderman Boyd. Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Ogilvie. Alderman Cone. Alderman Williamson. Alderman Carter. Alderwoman Cruzen. President Reed.
Aye.
Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderman Conway. Alderwoman Davis. 20 aye votes, 6 no votes.
By a vote, staying the motion, Alderman from the 24th. Madam Clerk, please place Board Bill number 173 on third reading calendar.
So noted.
Third reading consent.
Board Bill 140.
Alderman from the 18th, you recognize on the motion for the third reading calendar.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the board, I move for adoption of the third reading consent calendar.
Been moved by the Alderman from the 18th, seconded by the Alderman from the 10th. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Flowers. Alderman Bosley.
Okay.
Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderman Coulter. Alderman Conway. Alderman Ortman. Alderman Vollmer. Alderman Villa. Alderman Arnowitz. Alderwoman Murphy. Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Green. Alderwoman Behringer. Alderman Rhodey. Alderman Kennedy. Alderwoman Davis. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman French. Alderman Boyd. Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Ogilvie. Alderman Cone. Alderman Williamson. Alderman Carter. Alderwoman Cruzen. President Reed.
Aye.
Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderman Conway. Alderwoman Davis. Alderman Boyd. Aye. $25 aye votes, 1 no vote.
By vote, staying the motion for Alderman from the 18th, third read and final passage the aforementioned bills.
That's the extent of third reading consent.
Third reading report of engrossments.
Board Bill 173, sponsored by Alderman Ogilvie, Flowers, and Ortman, an ordinance pertaining to the regulation of minimum wage, amending Ordinance 70078 pertaining to Section 1, definitions, containing a severability clause and an emergency clause.
Perhaps it's too late, but I should note that the Alderman from the 23rd asked that his name be added to Board Bill 173.
Right.
Since I can't walk and chew gum at the same time, I forgot to bring it up. But so I move for final passage of Board Bill 173.
Been moved by the Alderman from the 24th, seconded by the Alderman from the 9th and the 10th. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, please call the roll. Bennett request for previous roll. There was an objection to previous roll. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus. No. Alderwoman Flowers. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderman Coulter. Alderman Conway. Alderman Ortman. Alderman Vollmer. Alderman Villa. Alderman Arnowitz. Alderwoman Murphy. Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Green. Alderwoman Behringer. Alderman Rhodey. Alderman Kennedy. Alderwoman Davis. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman French. Alderman Boyd. Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Ogilvie. Alderman Cone. Alderman Williamson. Alderman Carter. Alderwoman Cruzen. President Reed.
Aye.
Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderman Conway. Alderwoman Davis. I votes, 4 no votes.
By a vote, you sustain the motion. Alderman from 24th and 3rd read and finally passed the aforementioned bill. Report of enrollment.
Board Bills 140 and 173.
All other business being suspended, the President shall in open session fix his signature hereto to the end that these may become law. We dispense with line items 21, 22, miscellaneous unfinished business.
We have none.
Announcements.
Tuesday, Public Safety Committee meeting at 10 a.m. in the Kennedy Room. On Wednesday, we're having a Housing Committee meeting at 8:30 a.m. in the Kennedy Room. That's 8:30 a.m. in the Kennedy Room. Thursday, also, we're having a Public Safety Committee meeting at 10 a.m. in the Kennedy Room. Friday, full board meeting, 10 a.m. in the chambers. And also on Friday is the Employee Appreciation Picnic starting at 11:30 a.m. in Washington Square. That's the extent of my announcements.
Any further announcements? Any further? Alderman from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the board. On Wednesday, October the 7th, we're having an Intergovernmental Affairs Committee here in the Leisure Room.
All right, Madam Clerk, please make note of that.
What time? What time was that?
11 a.m. Again, 11 a.m. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alderman from the 21st.
I have a very somber announcement today. The headlines today in newspapers across America is that St. Louis is now overtaking Detroit as the murder capital of America. Riverfront Times has a story today detailing how we are the #1 per capita city in America for homicides and violence. This is nothing for us to be proud of at all. We're on pace to 2,000 people being shot this year in St. Louis City. 2,000 people this year alone. The circuit attorney estimates that in the 5 previous years before 2015, 13,000 people were victims of gun crimes in St. Louis City. By far, this is our top priority, or at least should be. 50 people have been murdered in the last 3 months. We're on pace to reach over 200 homicides by the end of the year. And what people need to understand, too, is that summer isn't our busiest time. Our top months, historically, for homicides are November and December. So as one of my favorite shows says, winter is coming. It's about to get worse if we don't act. Many of us down here have been calling for months for the mayor and the police chief, along with the other directors of the important departments that can help in these matters, to prepare a comprehensive plan, and we've been ignored. The Board of Aldermen's African American Caucus sent a letter several months over to the president, to the mayor, asking for a comprehensive plan. Haven't gotten it. There seems to be a complete lack of urgency on what's going on in our neighborhoods. It is our children being shot. It is our children who are being murdered, and there seems to be a complete lack of urgency on the mayor's part. But he does have his priorities. It seems to be his top priority is to subsidize, taxpayers subsidizing millionaires and billionaires to build a new stadium that is unneeded and unpopular. They are going around every possible way they can to prevent the citizens from having a vote in this matter, and they are about to send a bill over to us to have us make the decision, a very unpopular decision, to commit tax dollars to helping build an unneeded, unpopular new stadium. And so what I'm saying is this, is if the mayor's office does not give us a comprehensive plan and does not sit down with us to work out a satisfactory, comprehensive plans to deal with priority number one in this crisis that is killing so many people on our streets, then we will use every measure possible to stop that stadium funding from happening down here. Every parliamentary procedure. If I have to filibuster until I don't have any breath left in my lungs, that's what we'll do. Because the only way we're going to get action on what is priority for us is to affect the mayor's priorities. And if his priorities is that stadium, then so be it. But we need a comprehensive plan for this city because too many people are dying and it's affecting our neighborhoods, north and south. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Alderman from the second.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I'd like to announce that Live on the Rocks in the second ward is coming back. It will be October the 16th. At Riverview and 270 after 6 p.m. We'll have Solar Blues Band, we have a reggae band, and we have Mr. Jeff Harding. And also that at 4 o'clock on the 16th, Leonard Riggins was an officer for the fire department that was killed, not on duty, but serving his duty, helping someone that he thought was in a car accident that ended up shooting and killing him right down the street from his family. On the 16th at 4 o'clock in North Riverfront Park, we will have a dedication ceremony for a memorial bench that we have in his honor. His wife, Mrs. Riggins, invites you out and to remember him because it is his birth date. And Mrs. Riggins is a constituent of my ward, and she has carried her love for him all these years. It is really something to see. She has not let go of his memory, and she will keep the memory living on. So you're invited to come out on the 16th at 4 o'clock at North Riverfront Park. And then at 6 p.m., we're just going to meet a little bit north down the street for a concert, and we're also going to sing in his memory. So all are welcome.
Alderman from the ninth.
Are you saving the best for last?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to announce that tomorrow in Benton Park, we're having the Taste of Benton Park and also our last concert. But most importantly, we have our annual chalk art event that starts about 10 in the morning. All artists are welcome, and we also, love for kids to come. They don't really have to have an entry fee. They get a trash bag to help pick up trash, and then they get their pieces of chalk also. But it's always a lot of fun, and it starts about 10 a.m., and I think it'll go till after 6.
All right, thank you. Alderman from the first.
Mr. President, members of the board, I'd like to extend a thank you to the alderman from the 11th. It is often when people are pursuing an agenda and they take a side, it is very seldom that you have a person who will then take the other side and to say, yes, I'm on the other side, but the rule should be this. And he's not listening, but I want him to hear this. Alderman from the 11th.
Alderman from the 11th.
Alderman from the 11th. I'm thanking you for being a person that cares about the rules even when they don't go your way, and I want to thank you for coming and bringing some light to what the ruling should be, because when you came out and said it was not timely when the Alderman from the 24th made his challenge, that's not often that people do that. They usually want it to go their way, and I appreciate that you've been the president of the Board of Aldermen, you served on the board, and you also are in the state, you've been in the state, so that we get to use your expertise when we need it, and I thank you for that.
Any further announcements? Any further announcements? Alderman from the 18th, you recognize on the motion to excuse.
Mr. President, members of the board, I move that the Aldermen from the 5th, the 8th, and the 19th are excused for necessary absence.
Moved by the Alderman from the 18th. To entertain a second on that motion. Seconded by the Alderman from the 26th. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Alderman from the 18th, you recognize on the motion to adjourn.
Mr. President, members of the board, I move that the board adjourns until Friday, October 9th, 10 a.m.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 18th. Entertain a second on that motion. Seconded by the Alderman from the 13th. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed. Stand adjourned.